Dave just called and he is locked.
Okay, it is 1 p.m. We'll call this meeting to order with the note that Commissioner Nelson is trying to join it as we go. Is Pastor LeMay there?
I am. Thank you.
Okay, Pastor LeMay, if you would please give us our invocation, I appreciate it.
Thank you. I want to thank the commissioners again for the opportunity to do the invocations at the beginning of the meeting and to invoke the presence of God into this meeting. So let us pray. Father, we thank you, Lord, for Douglas County, for such a wonderful place that you allow us to live, the beauty that you created here and the wonderful people who live here. Lord, I want to pray for our commissioners today as they discuss different business of the county today. I pray that you give them wisdom and insight. May the decisions that they make honor you and be the best for our community. We pray, Lord, especially right now for this weekend, Lord. We know that there's these planned protests. We don't know what to expect right now. But Lord, we ask that you would have restraint on both sides with the protesters, the counter-protesters. Jesus said that blessed are the peacemakers. They shall be called the children of God. Let there be peace. I pray for our authorities, for the sheriff and the deputies. Give them great wisdom as they are peacemakers for righteousness. And I pray that everything would go really smooth, that there'd be no violence, but rather, Lord, you would be honored there. Again, I want to pray for our commissioners now as they make these decisions for our community. Give them your insight and wisdom. In Christ's name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. That's a good prayer there, Pastor. Thank you. Okay, and we'll ask Commissioner Rice to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
All right, since this is not a professional sporting event, if you would all stand and the flag with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. And now we'll talk about public comment. In order to ensure that every citizen desiring to speak before the board has the opportunity to express his or her opinion, it is requested that the audience refrain from making comments, hand clapping, or making any remarks or gestures that may interrupt, interfere, or prevent the speaker from commenting on items that are for possible action by the board. The board wants to encourage the respectful consideration of all views by members of the public. Public comment cards and comments left on the county website prior to the board meeting have been compiled and made a part of the supporting materials that have been provided to the county commissioners and the public for review. Only 2 periods of public comment will be taken during this meeting, once at the beginning of the board meeting and again at the end of the meeting. Public comments will not be taken on each agenda item. Public comment is limited to 3 minutes per person who has left a voice message on Douglas County public comment phone line, 775-783-6007. Once a public comment period has been opened. Once public comment closes, the voice messages will be played to the public and the county commissioners in the order they are received. No more than 1 voice message, public comment per person will be played during each public comment period. Douglas County's public comment line became available to take public comment at 1 p.m. Public comment will remain open for at least 5 minutes to allow members of the public to call or until the last caller has finished leaving a voice message on the county's public comment phone line. All right. Is there any public comment, Ms. Wood?
Yes, we have public comment, but I do want to know that Commissioner Nelson has joined the meeting, just for the record, so that we have him in the meeting. And I will start playing public comment.
Thank you very much.
My name is Laura, Laura Cadotte, Cadot. I oppose the sheriff's statement made to the librarian. In the interest of time, I am not going to read it. It made national news. It's been seen and read enough. His actions have created division and a lack of trust within our community. Besides violation of his oath of office, which is unacceptable, he is incurring additional expenses to the county budget. This matter needs to be agendized ASAP. In the meantime, you need to appoint an acting sheriff until this matter can be resolved. Thank you.
Okay, next message.
Lynn Mussey, M-U-C-C-Y. Administrative agenda item number 1. Dave Maxwell has been doing an excellent job on the audit committee, and Ted Gaines would work well with Dave. The only reason to replace him is court settling for his role in spearheading the RDA2 petition. Agenda items 5 and 6. The Conways knew this parcel was zoned forest and range when they bought it. There is no demonstrated need for our county for more lots. I suspect they're bringing this zoning change forward now to put it before a compliant board majority that ignores the master plan and what's best for the community. Please prove me wrong. Regarding the recent open letter from Christopher Bentley to Douglas County residents, I deplore the personal attacks against his family and employees. Mr. and Mrs. Bentley have indeed created a great business that has provided jobs and prosperity, and I believe them when they recount their charitable activities. But that should not insulate the Bentleys from community backlash for having bought BLM as a civil rights organization that exists to fight anti-Black bias and police brutality against innocent Black people, when in fact it's easily discovered that BLM is a violent, anarchist, Marxist organization. The BLM's best known chant is "Pigs in a blanket, fry 'em like bacon." Naively putting this anti-cop criminal gang into a tuxedo will not go over with the majority of Douglas County residents. I would take the Bentleys' complaints more seriously if they threatened to move their operations to inner city Portland.
Next call.
Hi, my name is Debbie Silva, Silva. I live in Minden, and I'm calling concerning the sheriff's violation of his oath of office and a request that this item be placed on the next agenda. I'm concerned that not only has he failed the oath of office and violated his duties and responsibilities, as well as concerns about whether he adheres to the Constitution. I feel that he is arbitrarily using his power, which is tyranny. Tyranny includes the arbitrary use of power. He should not be allowed by the Board of Commissioners to decide when and if he will use his power to protect and serve our community. I do support Black Lives, and I feel that he should not be allowed to make statements denying his services to the library board, the library, or to me. I want to feel safe in my community and be able to express my First Amendment rights, and know that I will be able to call the sheriff should somebody in this community decide to create a situation where they are violent towards me because I express that I support Black Lives Matter. I thank you very much and hope that you will do the right thing. We need to decide if the sheriff should be suspended and investigated. And we also need to decide why our small community has been subjected now to all of this disruption because the sheriff was not able to control what he says. And that makes me doubt whether he can control what he does. So thank you very much. Goodbye.
Okay, next.
Hello, this is Judge Young, and I wanted to speak to you because I always come over and tell you when something great has happened at the camp. Today I want to talk to you about something else. Obviously, all of you are aware of the fire that we had near the camp and how the camp staff responded heroically to that in counseling the children, making sure that they were prepared to move, taking care of them during that evening. Camp staff was there on guard, and the administration was out there at midnight. And both Ms. Garrison, Ms. Pauling, Mr. Lopez did not leave town, and they made sure that children were safe. And that was just a few weeks ago. About 3 weeks ago, you're aware that in Reno, there was an alleged gang member who used his vehicle to run down several young people in Reno. And one of those young people was killed. She was a recent graduate of the camp. She still has friends and a number of associates at the camp, girls who knew her, counselors who cared for her, and her loss was absolutely tragic to children at the camp and to the staff. And the staff has dealt with counseling children in the face of that horrific violence. Then just 2 weeks ago, a young lady ran from the camp, got out in the desert and tied her shoestrings around her neck. Fortunately, the camp staff had followed her. They had lost sight of her for a moment, but when they found her, they removed the shoestrings. She was not breathing well at that time. They got her help. They got her to a hospital, and she is cared for now. And then since that time, there was another young lady who just recently graduated from the camp. A few months ago, she earned her high school degree at the camp. When she graduated, she got off of probation. She ended up moving in with a boyfriend who abused her, destroyed her property, including her diploma. She called the camp and she asked for another copy of the diploma because it's all she had ever earned. And we made her one, but unfortunately she didn't get to come and pick it up because she died of an overdose last Friday. And that has stricken the camp and the camp staff and the children out there. And in light of all of that tragedy, the camp staff is still showing up, taking care of children, treating their grief and treating their own grief. And I only have 3 minutes, so I'm letting you know that what I'm asking is that you as commissioners send an email, acknowledge the trauma and the work and the efforts of that staff to take care of children who are in trauma themselves. I appreciate your time. I appreciate that you might follow through with that. The staff is doing an excellent job. Thank you.
Okay, next message.
Jim,
Did you say?
items 5 and 6, master plan and zoning map amendment.
Sorry, did you say something, Barry?
Never mind.
Amendments for 2 parcels in the Indian Hill. Jim, at items 5 and 6, master plan and zoning map amendments for 2 parcels in the Indian Hills area. Required finding A stands that it must promote the overall goals and objectives of the master plan. The most important of these is to retain our rural character, which this proposal would not meet. Staff also fails to mention any change in circumstances as required. Required finding B is to demonstrate a need. There's no basis for that claim. With the approval of 2,500 homes on Park Ranch, the increased number of homes allowed in the North Douglas Pacific Plan, and the 239 homes approved in Rancho Sierra,
There are more than 7,000 new dwelling units that can be built. You can't just keep claiming that there's a demonstrated need without taking that into consideration. Required finding D states that the proposal must be compatible with the actual and master plan use of adjacent properties, which county code defines as sharing a common boundary. The actual use of the adjacent property to the west and south is vacant land, and to the east is public land owned by the correctional center. The adjacent land to the south is not the Sunridge development. The master plan use of adjacent properties are public land to the east, forest and range to the south, and community facilities to the west. So again, this proposal would only be consistent at all with the use of the property to the north, which is in Carson City. Hence, this finding 2 cannot be met and the request must be denied. On item number 7, the zoning map amendment at Centerville and Pleasantview, let's focus on required finding C, that the proposed amendment is compatible with the actual master plan use of the adjacent properties. The property to the north, to the east, and most of the property to the south, 76% of the entire boundary, is all zoned 2 acre. The remaining quarter is larger developments, and somewhat irrelevant to the subject property, which is only 3 acres. There is no clear and compelling reason to oppose this zoning map amendment. At the Planning Commission meeting of June 9th, however, the applicant, Mr. Prosser, explained as follows, referring to his mother, Joyce Cancia, quote, "She is 92 this year. The sale of this property will provide her the money that she will be able to live 20 more years in independent senior living that she's in right now. So that is my reasoning for trying to get her the most money that she can have out of this property. So the only reason to amend the zoning is to enable his mother to live in the style in which she is accustomed until she's 112 years old, which is highly unlikely. Is that Douglas County's responsibility? Of course not. That is not an adequate reason to change the zoning. Just wanting to increase your profits is not sufficient. Amendments should have a high bar for approval. All findings must be made in the affirmative. The Planning Commission voted 5-1 to deny this application, citing its inability to meet findings B and C. You should do the same and deny this application."
Okay, next.
My name is Lorna Burkhardt, Lorna Burkhard. Today is August 6th, and I would like to report an ongoing problem on the corner of Dreslerville and Centerville Lane. Within the past year, many types of motor vehicles have been left for sale or parked on this empty lot. So far, I've left a message with the community development officer, discussed the problem with other concerned neighbors in my Cedar Creek community, and now I'm leaving this public comment recording for your consideration. The current RV was towed and dumped about a month ago, and this is probably not the first time a non-working vehicle has been towed and dumped within Douglas County. Obviously, the owner of this property has not been notified or is unresponsive to this issue, as there's no fence or signage on this vacant lot. At one point, the RV did have a red tag, but this is no longer in place. I have a practical suggestion. Because the sheriff cannot enforce certain codes within private property, and the Office of Code Enforcement seems to be ineffective because this is an ongoing issue within Douglas County, consider placing code enforcement under the sheriff's authority. I appreciate living in a clean and safe environment, and thank you for listening to this recording. Have a great day. Bye.
Okay, next.
Hello, my name is Stephanie Cowell, Stephanie, last name is spelled K-O. I am a Douglas County resident in the Ottawa Township. I'm speaking about the letter from the sheriff to the library board. I would like the county commissioners to condemn and denounce that letter. This is not a matter of politics, this is a matter of ethics. The sheriff was speaking out of his oath. He made an oath to serve the community with wellness and faithfulness, and I don't believe he did that with the statement in his letter. I would also request that the county commissioners, although I know they don't have any power over the removal of the sheriff, that there are obstacles to the removal of the sheriff if the community wants that. For example, COVID, because the recall, the petition for recall requires signatures, and there may be wet signatures required. I ask that the county commissioners consider assisting the community in getting around that obstacle and doing electronic signatures. So I hope that this item gets on the agenda for the next meeting, and that we hear a statement from the commissioners about the unethical practices and unethical statements that that the sheriff made. Thank you.
Okay, next.
Hello, my name is Jesse Graham, JESSEGRAHAM. I'm calling in opposition of the sheriff's letter to the library as both unethical and an overreach of his power. As an engineer, safety and ethics are my number one and number two priorities. If I were to go off of any client's political views as a reason to be unsafe, I would be held responsible both fiscally and lawfully. As such, I believe that the sheriff should also be held fiscally and responsible for anything that were to occur this Saturday. Thank you.
Okay, that is the last public comment voicemail that's been received. That came through at 1:13 p.m.
Okay, thank you. I was asked by the district attorney to read one input that they had, so let me pull that up. See if I can get it on Mass 360. Per the district attorney, sheriffs in Nevada are elected officials. The Board of County Commissioners do not appoint a sheriff in their respective counties. An elected sheriff is a member of the executive branch and is separate and independent from the legislative function of the Board of County Commissioners. A Board of County Commissioners does not have the jurisdiction, power, or authority to supervise a sheriff. In Nevada, the salaries for county elected officials such as sheriffs are set by the Nevada legislature, not the Board of County Commissioners. Similarly, under Nevada law, the trustees of the county library have the sole authority to appoint, evaluate, and supervise the director of the county library. The Board of County Commissioners do not appoint or supervise the director of the county library. End of statement. So now we will move on. And we will go to
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Walsh.
Yes, under public comment, there was an item talking about putting code enforcement under the sheriff's office. Perhaps we should agendize something in the future to explore putting code enforcement under the sheriff's office. Thank you.
Okay. I know Mr. Cates is on the line, so he should have made that note. Similarly, the request of the judge for a letter to the camp should be also agendized, I would hope. And then Mrs. Uhart's concern about the sale of vehicles on a particular corner should also be investigated. All right, now we'll move on to approval of the agenda.
Mr. Chair, I would move approval of the agenda as presented.
Second.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson. There are two items to be pulled from the agenda. One is the liquor board, and two is item 8 of the administrative agenda. With those two additions, do we still have a motion and a second?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay. So do you want to repeat the motion, or are they just good enough to say they are two additions?
Well, I'll move to approve the agenda, less item 1 of the liquor board, which is pulled, and item 8 from the administrative agenda.
All right. And the second agrees.
Agreed.
All right. So we have a motion by Commissioner Walsh, a second by Commissioner Nelson. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any nays? No nays. Then the motion carries. Approval of previous minutes. Do we have a motion for the special meeting and regular meeting minutes of June 25th and July 2nd?
Mr. Chair, I would move approval of the draft minutes of the June 25th, 2020 special meeting and the July 2nd, 2020 regular meetings of the Board of County Commissioners.
Second.
Thank you. The motion was by Commissioner Nelson, and the second by Commissioner Nelson?
Tie, I think.
Huh?
Tie, I think, Wes and I were.
Okay.
We're fine.
Wes got in? All right. So we have a motion by Commissioner Walsh, second by Commissioner Rice. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any nays? All right. And then we have the consent calendar, items A through L. And there's an item M, which is the redevelopment item, and we'll have to adjourn as the county commission and reconvene as the RDA 1. So that item will be considered when we do that. So just items A through L for the consent calendar. Anyone want to pull any of those?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to pull item I for discussion.
All right. Mr. Walsh, any other items to be pulled? Okay, with that, do we have a motion?
Mr. Chair,
I'd move to approve.
Go ahead, Dave. Go ahead.
I'd move to approve the consent calendar I through L, less item I.
Okay, I heard I, but you meant A through L, and except for
A
item
through L minus I, without
Okay.
I.
Without I.
Without I.
All right. So we have a motion, and then was there a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Nelson, second by Commissioner Ingles. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right. Now we'll move on to adjourning as the county commission and convening as the redevelopment agency. And this is item M under the consent. We can either approve it as a consent item or we can discuss it. So that will be part of the motion to approve it. So can I get a motion on?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the consent item number M on the calendar.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, and we have a motion by Commissioner Rice, a second by Commissioner Nelson to approve item M as a consent item. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any nays? No nays. The motion is approved as a consent item, redevelopment agency, and we will adjourn as the redevelopment agency and reconvene as the Board of County Commissioners. In that vein, we'll start with the items pulled from the consent calendar, which is item I. I'll read it into the record. For possible action, discussion to accept the quarterly jail status report for the second quarter of 2020. Captain Duffy. Is Captain Duffy here to do that?
I don't see anybody from the sheriff's office.
We have the sheriff, don't we? I gotta enlarge this.
Natalie Wood for the record. The sheriff was on earlier, but I do not see him. I can try and get them back on the call if you'd like to move forward with other items while I get them on.
Yeah, and that's what we'll do. Thank you very much, Ms. Wood. So we'll move on to item 1 on the administrative calendar. And I got to pull that back up. I'll read item 1 into the record. This is for possible action discussion on 2 appointments to the Audit Committee for 4-year terms from August 2020 through April 2024. Mr. Cates.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There are currently 2 vacancies on the Audit Committee. As you mentioned, these are 4-year terms. The county solicited for the vacant position in accordance with Douglas County policy. In your packet are the applications that we received. There are 3 of them. We received one from David Maxwell, who is a current member of the Audit Committee, as well as an application from Kenneth Bezich and an application from Timothy McCoy. And happy to answer any questions. And I believe those folks are here.
Okay, let me get that pulled back up. I don't see them on the.
I see Dave Maxwell.
That's all I see.
I thought we had them.
Well, let's see. Let's have Mr. Maxwell, if he cares to speak to the issue at all. Mr. Maxwell?
Yes, I'm here.
Do you care to speak to the nomination of you for the Audit Committee?
I think the other 2 gentlemen are extremely well qualified, and as I read them. And of the 3, I am probably least qualified, but I do have 2 years of experience on the committee. So I'll leave that decision up to you.
All right. And I don't see the others by name here. Mr. Cates, are you contacting them or?
Mr. Cates, you are muted.
I said I'm finding out what's going on right now. Sorry.
Okay.
They were invited to the meeting, and I have not seen them log on, but I can follow up and call them as well. And just a note for the previous item, the sheriff is getting on shortly.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the board or any discussion from the board now? Mr. Ingles.
It's always interesting with these entities that so many of our citizens are eminently qualified, and due to the fact that Mr. Maxwell has been on the Audit Committee and involved with all of the financial circumstances that have gone on with the county as of late, I would definitely support him. The other 2 candidates, it's tough to say, because here again, you have great candidates who are qualified, and it's always a hard decision. So that's just my 2 cents.
Appreciate your comments. Anyone else? Mr. Nelson, go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that Mr. Maxwell has been chairman for the last 2 years and has done an excellent job at being chairman. He has really taken this job to heart and really worked hard to reach out to the community. And I would appreciate your reappointing him.
Mr. Walsh, did you have a comment?
I do. I would like to thank Mr. Maxwell for his service for the last 2 years, but perhaps it's time for some new blood on the committee. He did indicate that the other 2 members or applicants are very well qualified. So I would move to approve the 2, Mr. Bezich and Mr. McCoy, to the Audit Committee.
All right. So are you making a motion?
No, I think Mr. Rice had his hand up before. I didn't know if he wanted to make a comment.
Well,
Mr. Rice?
I would like to hear from the other two candidates before we make any decision. From what I've read, they're eminently qualified for anything financial, both being CPAs and incredible background. But I would like to hear from both of them before I make a decision, if that's possible.
Well, Ms. Wood said she was going to try and get him on the line. I imagine she's still working on that.
I think that before we take a motion, we should hear from the other two candidates as well.
Ms. Wood, I see you're back up.
Yes, still trying to get a hold of them to get them on the call.
Well, if that's the case, Mr. Rice, would it be acceptable to take a 10-minute break at this point? Or we could move this item to item number 8 or 9 in the agenda. Mr. Nelson.
I'd like to also point out that Mr. Maxwell drew a short card on the when he was first appointed to this and only got a 2-year. So I'd like to see him stay on the board with me at this point.
Okay. Any other comments?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I think maybe we wait and push this item back to item, later on in the agenda to see if Ms. Wood can contact the two applicants.
Okay, then we'll hold this item until we've made contact with the two of them, or they'll make it the last item, which I believe would be item 9, since item 8 is gone. Ms. Wood, were you able to get I see the sheriff is back on the line. So we'll go back to item I on the consent. All right, let me reread it again for the calendar, or for this. Let me go back and pull it up.
Natalie, do you have a page number for that one?
I'll have it for you in a second, Wes.
Thank you.
It's on page 5 of the summary.
Well, that doesn't help me.
Packet page 261.
What is that?
Packet page 260.
260, thank you.
Jeez. Okay, it's for possible action. Item I, discussion to accept the quarterly jail status report for the second quarter of 2020. Captain Duffy.
Chairman Penzo's Dan Crowley for the record. Do you have a question on a specific item in the report, or do you want me to go through the report item by item, or what are you looking for?
Commissioner Walsh pulled it, and so I'll ask him that question.
Yes, thank you. Sheriff, I just wanted to, first of all, commend your staff and Captain Duffy on a job well done. The report is well written. I think we have probably the premier jail facility, perhaps on the entire West Coast of the United States. I was just concerned about one thing. We have this issue coming up this weekend. Should things get out of hand, which we all hope they do not, do we have sufficient capacity in our jail?
We do. So the sheriff's office runs 2 jail facilities, as you gentlemen are well aware of. The main jail is here in Minden at the JLEX Center. And then our other jail is up at the lake, at the Judicial Center there. The Valley Jail's capacity is much larger than the Lake Jail, probably more than half. Right now, our average daily population is about between 40 and 50 inmates. So what we've done to prepare for this weekend is we've moved the bulk of our inmates to the Lake Jail, and we'll house them there. We've done that for two reasons. One, if for some reason we have to evacuate the Minden Jail, it'll be much easier with less inmates in there that we would have to evacuate. So for their safety and security, we've kind of removed them from the situation. And then also, if we do get in a situation where we do have to make a large amount of arrests, we'll have the facility and the capacity to accept them into our jail and to house them. I have reached out to Carson City and Lyon County. They've offered to take some of our inmates if we get to that point where we need to move some to another county. They've agreed to accept some of our inmates in that event. I am hopeful that we won't have to do any of that, and this weekend will be peaceful and we won't make any arrests. That's my hope. But we've planned. We're hoping for the best, and we plan for the worst. So.
Well, I appreciate that, Dan, very much, and I applaud you for making all these contingent plans. Thanks very much.
All right. Any other comments?
I move that we accept the reporting.
Second.
A motion by Commissioner Rice, a second by Commissioner Walsh. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any nays? Thank you for the report, Sheriff. And we'll move back onto the administrative calendar. Ms. Wood, do you have a report on people that you could get a hold of or could not?
Yes, sir. Natalie Wood for the record. Kenneth is not available, and we were not able to get a hold of Timothy, but left him a message.
Okay, so we'll continue to postpone this until the 9th item on the administrative calendar. All right. And now we'll move on to item 2. We're just going right along here. Okay, for possible action, discussion to introduce ordinance 2020-1574, an ordinance of the Board of County Commissioners of Douglas County, Nevada, designed by the short title or designated by the short title 2020 Water Refunding Bond Ordinance. That's the short title. Providing for the issuance of the Douglas County, Nevada General Obligation Limited Tax Water Refunding Bonds, additionally secured by pledged revenues, Series 2020, that's the long title, in the maximum aggregate amount of $2,030,000, providing the form, terms, and conditions thereof and covenants related to the payment of said bonds, and providing the effective date. This is the first reading. Ms. Willoughby, welcome.
Thank you. Terry Willoughby for the record. This is not new debt issuance. This is merely taking existing debt and refunding it at a lower rate without extending the term. So we are expecting about $162,000 over the remaining life of the bonds. So that'll be $162,000 in savings to ratepayers. And we'll bring back the bids to the board. It's expected at the September 3rd meeting with a closing date of September 9th.
Good job. Good job.
Thank you.
Questions by the board? Any questions?
Mr. Rice and Mr. Nelson.
Well, let me start at the top. Mr. Rice?
My question is, according to the agenda, this is for possible action. Is this informational only?
I'll refer that to district attorney.
Cynthia Gregory from the Douglas County District Attorney's Office. It is for introduction only, which means you only have to read the title into the record and do not have to take action on it. I think it was simply an oversight that it was listed for possible action. But since it is, you could take action if you wanted to introduce it, but technically under the law, you've already introduced it and no further action is required.
Thank you.
Comes back in the second reading in September. Is that correct?
That's correct. Terry Willoughby for the record, and we will have the results of the bids and have the final interest rate and the final numbers at that time.
Okay, Mr. Nelson, did you have a question?
That answered my question. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Ingles, go
This is
ahead.
a comment. Ms. Willoughby, this is the way to run a railroad. Good work catching these kinds of things.
Thank you. We knew the opportunity was out there, and I've checked with our financial advisor, Marty Johnson of J&A Advisors. He's also on the line, but this was the only opportunity we could take advantage of. So thank you.
Good work.
All right. So we have dispensed with one item there, gentlemen. Well done. Thank you, Ms. Welby. And we'll go back to reading the agenda, going to item number 3. For possible, item number 3 is for presentation only. Introduction of Ordinance 2020-1573, a zoning map amendment from A19 Agriculture 19-acre minimum lot size to PF public facilities for approximately 3.91 acres. Subject property is located at the northwestern intersection of Zero Lane Road and Hayborn Road in the Minden Community Plan area. The applicant is the town of Minden, the town manager, J.D. Frisbee. The property owner is the Park Ranch Holdings, APN 1320-32-501-021. First reading, Mr. Booth on behalf of Community Develop, Mr. Frisbee on behalf of the applicant. This is a 5-minute presentation. Go ahead, sir.
Good afternoon, Chairman, members of the board. Sam Booth, for the record, Planning Manager. Similar to your last item, this is just merely an introduction of Ordinance 2020-1573. No board action is required on this item, just entitled to be read into the record. I would just say that this is a 3.9 acre parcel. The town of Minden is requesting a change in zoning in order to accommodate future use of a town well site. The Planning Commission heard this item at their July 14th, 2020 meeting and approved their request 5-2. Additionally, if introduced today, the item will be heard for possible action in second reading at your September 3rd, 2020 Commissioners meeting.
Okay, questions from the board? I have a question. There was no money associated with this. Is this a donation, Mr. Frisbee?
That is correct. It is.
And the purpose behind it is to have the well there?
That too is correct. We're just looking for a contingency plan if something was to go south with one of our other wells. Right now, Minden's so small of a footprint. This is about the only area we can see that will not have any negative impact or influence on our other wells. And we're just trying to be prepared for whatever may come.
It is in a flood zone. Are you going to have to do anything special for the well?
We'll cross that bridge when we get there. As I said, as of right now, we have no anticipation of putting a well there anytime soon. Just looking for a spot that works.
Okay, are you going to require Zero Lane Road to be put in?
Not at this time. You know, like I said, there's zero anticipation of having a well there in the near future. That's all part of the development agreement within the Hayborn Meadow subdivision, aka the Ranch of Gardnerville. So we're just kind of following.
There's several AKAs in that. Okay.
Can I ask a question?
You have a question, sir? Go ahead.
JD, do you have any idea how deep you'd have to go to put a well in out there?
No, usually when we do a well, we would do a pilot hole first. Most of our wells sit around 300, 350 feet around the valley, and it kind of sits at the same elevation of most of our wells. So that's kind of where I would anticipate.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Any other questions from the board? Seeing none, this was a presentation. We'll move on to item 4. Maybe. Okay, item 4. For possible action. Discussion on request by Carter Hill Homes for a modification to the development schedule for the planned development PD 05-003, the Cottages at Carson Valley. If approved, the request would extend the time to file a final map for phase 1 of the development by 6 months, combine phase 1 and phase 2, and require recording of the combined phase by map by January 15, 2021. The subject property is located at the northwest corner of the intersection of Kimmerling Road and Bing Road in the MFR PD multifamily residential with planned development overlay zoning district in the Gardnerville Ranchos Community Plan Area. APNs 1220-21-111-126 and 1220-21-111-127, DP 20-0151. Sam Booth on behalf of Community Development, Keith Rubin on behalf of the applicant. 20-minute presentation, approximate.
Mr. Chair, I'd just like to, I think, make a correction. I think you said northwest corner of intersection of Kimberling and Bing. I think it's the southwest corner.
Southwest, yes. Thank you for the correction. All right, Mr. Booth, or is it going to be Mr. Dallaire?
I think, let me see, excuse me, I think we've got the wrong one up here. Hang on.
Yeah. You want 4, not 5.
Okay, can you see that now, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, I can.
Okay, Sam Booth, once again, for the record. To give the commission a background of this project, this was originally approved as PD 05-003 in 2005. This project approval included a PD overlay, amending the base zoning from SFR2 to multifamily residential, MFR, and a tentative subdivision map to create 59 single-family lots, 24-unit residential care facility on the property as well. And also included in the PD was a previously approved 140-unit group housing facility. Simply presented today is a request by the applicant to extend the recording timeline for project phase 1 of LDA 16019. And this, since 2005 with the original approval, this development has been amended several times over the years. The latest amendment was in 2016, and a subdivision map in 2 phases was approved, and that's the LDA 16019. So that subdivision map in 2016 had phase 1 and 2. They were both 11 lots in each of those phases. Phase 1 was to be recorded by July 15th of this year. And the applicant filed this extension request before that deadline, has requested some additional time to be able to present that final map to community development and record it. And what they're proposing with this extension is to combine phase 1 and 2 into one map that would have 22 lots, and to present that for recording by January 15th of 2021. Would note that you can see in the top table there, phase 2 of the project wasn't due to record until July 15th of 2024. So while they are requesting a 6-month extension, it would speed the project up by about 3.5 years to get both phases recorded. I've got 2 maps here. On the left, you can see the proposal. Phase 1 is kind of in the center of the development, south of the road here, Ellie's Place, and these are the 11 lots around Ellie's Court. Phase 2 is along Kimmerling Road on the outside of the development. So what we're discussing today was phase 1 was set to expire in July, and the proposal by the applicant again is to combine both of these into one phase that would be recorded by next January. In your packets on pages 444 through 447 are the findings to approve a plan development. Additionally, there's a finding required in NRS when approving an extension to the timeline for recording. I have an explanation for each of those findings there, and I do believe the findings can be made, but in summary, I believe they can be made because no change is being requested that will affect the ability of each of those findings. The project was previously approved to be constructed in 2 phases, as I said, with that subdivision map in 2016. Phase 1 consisted of 11 lots to record by July of this year. Phase 2 consisted of 11 lots to record by July of 2024. And the modification is going to equal 22 lots being recorded by January of 2021, shortening that timeline by 42 months. I would note, Mr. Chairman, that Keith Rubin, representing the applicant, is on the line. Keith can speak to the process that they've been going through to get the final map recorded and some of the hurdles they've been up against. But I can vouch for him that the technical map review has been submitted to our engineering department, and they've reviewed the map, and they're moving forward towards recording that map. And that is, again, for both phases. So they were close. They weren't able to meet the timeline of July 15th, and therefore needed to request this extension. So the recommended motion on this by staff is to approve DP 20-0151, which would be a modification to the development schedule for PD 05003 for the cottages at Carson Valley.
Thank you, Mr. Booth. And Mr. Rubin, do you have anything to add to what Mr. Booth said?
No, Mr. Chairman, I think he covered the bases quite well. I just want to let the board know we are very close. The improvement plans, how it works to record a final map is you need an improvement plans, you need a bond posted, the money posted with the county or security, and then the map itself gets circulated to not only the county, but all the other agencies that signed it. And then once that's done, it's recorded. We do have the improvement plans submitted, and the county's reviewed those. They've given us back some technical corrections. We are in the process of making those. The final map has been submitted for technical corrections. And once those are together, we prepare the cost estimate and the county approves that. And then the security is posted with the agreement. And then we circulate the map for signatures. There is some COVID issues in that. Most of these agencies, particularly the state agencies, they don't allow visits to the office, so these either have to meet people in back alleys near their house, which we've done from time to time, where you have to physically mail them and then wait for them to come back. So it has created some delays as a result.
Any questions from board members? Mr. Ingles.
Mr. Rubin, you're already excavating out there. Is that true?
I'll let Brandon respond to that. I'm not physically present in Minden right now.
Well, they're already excavating out there, so they must be looking at a predetermined outcome of this request. Secondly, I don't know,
they may have a grading permit, and I'll just jump in there. There's possible.
All right. Okay. Anyway, now, Mr. Booth or Mr. Dallaire, is there a will serve letter from the grid for these additional houses out there?
Yes, Commissioner Ingalls, will serves were provided from each of the utilities involved, and that would include grid, back when this subdivision was initially approved in 2016.
Well,
So
that was for 80 homes, and now there's an additional 20 being requested.
that's not the case. This extension, Commissioner, is not adding those 22 homes. Back in 2016, when they did modify the development, and units were moved around, but their will serve from grid at that time was to support these 22 lots.
Also, this is going to add additional traffic pressure on an already overloaded Kimmerling.
It should have been discussed in the traffic analysis that was performed prior to the approval of the development. Mr. Rice?
It's my understanding that we're adding no roofs out there at all. What we are doing is extending the period of time for the one development and then moving up the other development so that we're not creating more housing. What we are doing is just moving the timelines. That this will help get the entire project done sooner rather than later. And everything has already been approved by prior boards, if that's correct.
I think it is.
Commissioner Rice. I could say this expiration date, as I showed you there, was July of this year, just for phase one, which is those 11 lots on the interior of the subdivision. So if that were to expire, phase two, the next 11 lots is still valid, and they had 3 more years for that. So either way, there's an additional 11 lots that the developer can move forward with. To Commissioner Engel's comments about some site work being done, that's typical throughout the process, and I don't know, without asking our engineering department right now, what permits we've issued, but it is reasonable that ahead of issuing the final map and that recording, that the developer would submit a site improvement permit, and he would get approvals to do site work and installing the utilities and those type of things.
Commissioner Ingalls and then Commissioner Walsh.
Okay, the thing I find curious about this original project was 80 SFRs, and now it's going up another 20, 21, whatever it is. So I'm not clear on how all this came about.
Mr. Engels?
140 to begin with.
Yeah.
And then it was downgraded because it couldn't build them all. This is a project that's typical of Douglas County. It's a 15-year project that's just getting built. It was stagnant for a very long period of time. And they ran out of money, and the rest of the stuff, it just wasn't economical to develop them. But it is on your a list of approved developments that you've been handing out, So, Mr. Walsh?
Yeah, I just want to make a point of clarification. To deny this extension would not eliminate the underlying zoning, which is considerably more dense than what it is proposing. And so a no vote could very likely result in many more homes being built than what's proposed.
Any other questions or comments? Okay. If there are no other questions or comments, then we'll be looking for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve DP 20-0151, a modification to the development schedule for planned development PD 05-003 for the cottages at Carson Valley as presented.
Second.
So a motion by Commissioner Rice, a second by Commissioner Walsh. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any nays?
Opposed.
So the motion passes 4-1. So we'll move on to item number 5. I'll read that into the record. Now's the time for your slide, Mr. Booth.
Mr. Chairman, if I can, I would request that we could read item number 5 and item number 6 into the record together. My presentation really includes both, and we do have 2 separate motions for those items.
Yeah, I was going to do that. I was going to read 5 and 6, and then we will vote on them separately. Any objections to that, gentlemen?
No, sir.
Okay. For possible action, discussion to approve resolution 2020R-054, a master plan amendment to change 39.4 acres from forest and range land use to 39.4 acres of single-family estate land use for 2 parcels within the Indian Hills Jacks Valley Community Plan. The property owners are Dennis and Marcia Conway, represented by Keith Rubin. APNs 1420-08-501-001 and 1420-08-501-002. Mr. Booth on behalf of Community Development, Mr. Rubin on behalf of the applicant. 20-minute presentation approximate. Item 6 for possible action. Discussion to adopt Ordinance 2020-1568, a zoning map for 2 parcels within the Indian Hills Jacks Valley Community Plan to change the zoning from FR-19 Forest and Range 19-acre minimum parcel size to SFR1 single family residential 1-acre minimum parcel size for 39.4 acres. The property owners are Dennis and Marcia Conway, APNs 1420-08-501-001 and 1420-08-501-002. Second reading. Mr. Booth on behalf of Community Development and Mr. Rubin on behalf of the applicant, 20-minute presentation approximate. All right, Mr. Booth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sam Booth, Planning Manager for the record. Would note once again, Keith Rubin is on the line representing the applicant. And I believe the property owner, Dennis Conway, is also on the line for any questions. Gentlemen, this site includes 39.4 acres. It borders, or it sits, excuse me, on the Carson City, Douglas County border, which is on the north and on the east side of the property. You can see it in this image here, highlighted in red. There are 2 parcels there. There's a western piece and the eastern piece. Both parcels are in the Indian Hills Jacks Valley Community Plan area. You can see on the map where Ridge Drive is to the west. Access to the site is actually via Center Drive from Carson City, which comes down the county line here and then veers to the east as it enters the property. On this image, the property is highlighted in yellow, those parcels. The county boundary is highlighted in blue. And then projects that have been approved around the site are highlighted in red here. And I also have those labeled. So you'll note to the west, and sharing the boundary with this property, is the Valley Knolls Plan Development, which is a single family plan development with SFR 8,000 zoning. And lots of as small as 5,000 square feet because it's within a planned development. There at the corner of Sunridge Drive is the multifamily component of the Valley Knolls Plan Development. And there are triplexes, 96 triplexes proposed in that area. To the north is the Big George Plan Development that was approved late last year. And to the south, albeit across another property here that is zoned forest and range, is the Sunridge Plan Development. You can see those homes and the golf course located there. To the north of the site, adjacent in Carson City, is this Shoals Ranch specific plan. This is a image of the current master plan for the site. Today, the properties are zoned, the future land use of the properties is forest and range. And that's the same is true for the property to the south in this location, which is forest and range as well. To the south, again, is the Sunridge Plan Development, the open space portion of Sunridge, which was dedicated with the plan development, is forest and range zoning. Currently, we do things a little bit differently now that when the Valley Knolls Plan Development came forward and the Big George Plan Development came forward, the open space with those we have zoned as community facilities. I'm saying zoning. The future land use was community facilities. So you can see the yellow portion is where the units in Valley Knolls are actually located, and the open spaces to the east buffering this property. So the proposal is to make the site future land use designation of single family estate. This designation allows lots between 1 and 2 acres in size. The current zoning of the property is forest and range 19 acre, so a 19 acre minimum parcel size. You can see the 2 parcels highlighted in red. Again, to the south is also FR19 zone property. The proposal is to rezone the property single family residential 1 acre that could allow up to 1 acre density on the site. Would note that the Shoals Ranch specific plan is this brown area here. They have a density of 6,000 square foot lots there, but there is a special area here just north of the property that's zoned for 1 acre lots. There's also a manufactured housing 1 acre zoning in Carson City that is on the eastern side of the property here. So it would be compatible with those 1 acre lots directly to the north. To the west side, again, this is the Valley Knolls Plan Development, and you can see the SFR 8000 zoning for the residential component of that, while the east side of the property is public facilities. To the east, this is in Carson City, and this is agricultural land and open space, I believe owned by the prison. As far as the utilities on or adjacent to the site, there are water and sewer that have been installed by Douglas County, and I think the developers for the North Douglas County specific plan that run adjacent to the property and along the property lines here. You can see in green sewer lines, and in blue are the water lines. The applicant additionally has intent to serve letters for water and sewer from Douglas County, and will serve letters from Charter Communications, Frontier, NV Energy, and Southwest Gas. As far as the traffic is concerned for the site, the applicant did submit a traffic trip generation analysis, for a potential of 28 single-family lots, and the traffic study is not required, a full traffic study, if trips are below 500 average daily trips, and their study showed that there would be a potential of 322 peak hour trips in the evening. 322 average daily trips, and in the evening, peak of 32 per hour. This development, as I said before, has access to the site from Center Drive through Carson City, which goes north, and then would access Topsy Lane to get out to 395, or Center Drive continuing north to Snyder Avenue in Carson City. And in consideration of the North Douglas County specific plan area and Snyder Ranch, this development would be required to submit a full traffic report with any future land division submittal. And we have spoken to Carson City about this development, and they're interested in seeing the traffic report and are looking at improvements potentially to Center Drive. This is a conceptual site plan that the applicant submitted. Part of the requirement here, you can see Center Drive as it comes down and accesses the property, and they're showing a cul-de-sac on the west side of the property and a cul-de-sac to the east side of the property for lots. Would note that this is just conceptual. Approval today is not approving this map, and the applicants would have to come back in the future with a land division application and tentative subdivision map. So the findings for approval of this development, there's two sets of findings, of course, because we have two items 5 and 6 here. The findings for a master plan amendment and a zoning map amendment can be found in your packet, pages 473 to 475. Staff believes the findings may be made in the affirmative for the requested amendments. Can give you a summary from the Planning Commission. Planning Commission heard this back in April 14th. If you remember, the board granted a continuance of this item. But back in April, the Planning Commission recommended approval of the master plan amendment by a vote of 6-1. Member Acola was the nay vote on that item, and recommended approval of the zoning map amendment by a vote of 6-1 as well. Once again, Member Acola was the nay vote. So I have two recommended motions, one for each of the items, but would also defer to Keith Rubin, the representative for the applicant, and once again, I believe the property owner is on the line.
The property is on the line?
The property owners
are on the line. Okay. Mr. Rubin, do you have anything to add to what Mr. Booth presented?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I do. Sam, could you pull up my PowerPoint?
You're not going to go over the same information.
I know that you like that, Mr. Chairman, so I was going to do that because I understand you really, it takes 2 times. No, I'm not going to. There's one slide I wanted to show you in there. I think it's towards the last part of this, Sam. There's an image of the, no, I don't see it. Okay, there we go. That one right there, you get the cursor. Yes. Okay, it wasn't clear in the slide that Sam had showed, but the county approached the property owner to grant them easements for water lines. And I want to make sure it's understood that it not only covers the east boundary, which goes north to Carson, but also the north boundary of the project site was granted by Mr. Conway to Douglas County, as well as the, now that he did not, the easement for the sewer line, which is in green, was adjacent to his property, but is off-site. But I wanted to make you aware that those easements were granted by him. Then I wanted just to briefly talk about the North Douglas County specific plan. Sam, could you pull up slide number maybe 5? We'll show that the best. Okay, thanks. So this North Douglas County specific plan basically encompasses everything west of Center Drive, all the way north in this slide and south to the to Sunridge, and then fronting on 395. About I think it was 2001 or so. This was all federal land owned by the Bureau of Land Management. The county came in and through a specific plan hired a consultant to help them prepare this for these federal lands, to making a deal of sorts with the federal government to zone them up, because they were all zoned FR40, and hopefully get some revenue from this that would be shared with the county to buy open space easements. For whatever reason, the BLM or Forest Service, whoever owned them, did not follow through with their end of the bargain, unfortunately. So this is how the North Douglas County specific plan came to being. When the county looked at these areas, though, they weren't really thinking of, hey, let's take a comprehensive look at all the property ownership in this area. They only focused on the federal ownerships of these properties by and large, and they just kind of left the Conway's property, and actually, the truth be told, the neighbor to the south kind of out there, hanging out there without really any thought to making them part of this plan. And again, I think the focus was because it was really for the federal lands. So I want to, it's kind of weird. I mean, these are the only 2 properties of this zoning. You can see it clearly in the map on this side of 395 that isn't developed already with a golf course. It's just kind of, it's like a sore thumb. I don't know how else to put it. So and when you look at the findings, the Planning Commission spent a lot of time on this matter. They have a lot more time than the board does to review these things, and they sometimes take a deep dive, and they agreed with myself, the owners, and the staff that we do indeed make these findings. So I just wanted to kind of talk about that briefly, just point out the context of the matter and the availability of utilities, which is usually a big impediment of property being developed that's zoned FR19. Those are usually found in the outskirts of the county. Thank you. And I'll respond to any questions, or Mr. Conway, of course, is available.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the board members? Commissioner Ingles.
Mr. Rubin, I didn't quite catch it. Do these properties have water rights?
I don't think they have underground water rights because it's never been in agriculture.
So there's no domestic wells or anything that you're aware of out there?
There's a domestic well for residential use, and the state, just the well does not require a water right. You're allowed one per residence. So there is, I believe, one domestic well where Mr. Conway's house is currently on the west side of Center Drive.
So that well would the use of it, or just sitting out there, not being used?
Well, he lives there, so his domestic well is in use.
Oh, okay.
But it would not be in use once this is approved as a development.
He would be required to connect to the community water system and abandon
Right.
as well.
Right.
Okay.
He'll have to pay for it.
He'll have to pay for it. And the connection and capacity fees for all these proposed lots would have to pay into the system.
And that includes he's probably on septic right now as well, right?
Correct.
His home is.
Yeah. Okay.
So there'll be 20 more customers on the sewer line too. Any other questions? Commissioner Nelson.
Not necessarily a question, but this is a master plan amendment, and one of the findings that has to be met is a need. And with all of the subdivisions we've got going out there, I personally don't see any need for additional subdivision in this part of the county.
All right. Commissioner Walsh.
Well, I think what they talk about is a demonstrated need for a particular type of lot. And these are low density 1 acre lots. And in the North County, according to the staff report, there are only a few 1 acre lots available. So I think it would meet that finding.
Further questions or comments?
Well, with all the pressure coming on this area and every place in the Intermountain West from Californians, one could always argue there's a need. That's it.
All right. I have a couple questions on the maps. I'll start out with the maps. I don't know how many of you have gone out there, but I went out there and kind of walked because I wasn't sure of all of what they were presenting in the case that we have. And first of all, my basic comment is you ought to use maps that are really a lot more current than the maps that you're using, especially the ones that look like they're taken from satellite, because the road that you depict that goes from left to right and winds around there is it's new because the Valley Knolls folks have dug down a good 40 feet across that entire plain there, and they've moved a lot of dirt, so it doesn't at all approximate what you have as current topography in that particular area. And it's hard to orient yourself because the only place you have to do that is the church and the sheriff's office. So having said that, I was trying to look at where the applicant's land is versus the one that's still forest and range, which has a house on it and in fact is a ranch in my view. And so I think it's when I like Mr. Slade's comment about this when he said that determining these things is vague. And he sent that to us in a letter that's in our supplemental materials. And I think that's true. Defining it, as Mr. Ingles just showed, it's hard to do. I think the property owners have done what they can to make sure that they're getting all of the services, which meets one of the criteria, and they're in line for those services. I think the one finding that's disputable is their demand. I think Mr. Walsh answered that question by virtue of the fact that this is a different kind of development. If you look at what is already carved out topographically, and you stand at the western side of their property and you look down, you can see that there's a tremendous amount of building, but it isn't all in Douglas County. There's a tremendous amount just north of them in Schultz Ranch and Carson City. So it seems compatible. It seems like it's a different kind of offering. And so I agree with the Planning Commission. And I thought that Ms. Casey summed that up extremely well on her comments when she says that forest and range does not belong here anymore, because it certainly is not forest and range. So I'm really tending to approve this or vote for approval of both the amendment to the master plan and the zoning map amendment. Does anybody have anything to offer on top of that?
Chair?
About that? Mr. Ingles?
We're already pumping 1 million gallons of water a day to Carson. And this is going to put more stress on an already, what I think is an overtaxed aquifer that's bringing the county water up from an aquifer. And we're starting to see a situation here in the county where we're going to see these little bits and pieces, because there's not many projects the magnitude of Big George that can even be done anymore. And at some point, we're going to have to start to restrict all of the development that has been created by the demand from California. So I'm opposed to this in that regard. And we have to start doing this with these small fill-in type projects, because we're going to start dying of 1,000 cuts.
I appreciate your concern, but we're still well under our perennial yield. And the other part of this is that water is Carson City's water. They have.
Well, I beg to differ with you, because Minden is already having trouble with a well that is got a high concentration of arsenic buildup. And a few months back, Minden wanted to set aside, I think it was about $50,000, so they could put in a scrubber for their system. And all of that starts to indicate that an aquifer is being over appropriated.
No, that's over appropriation is a designation from the state engineer. What they're trying to do is blend to reduce the concentration, which the EPA reduced on its own with one.
I understand all that. And if a aquifer is being adequately replenished, this doesn't happen.
Yes, it does. It's dependent on where it's drawing the arsenic from. And we're drawing it from the west side into the aquifer. And it's heavier than the water, so it goes to the bottom. And then what we're doing is bringing it up by pumping. But that's neither here nor there. The thing that's most important to remember is that this is, when you say we're depleting it by pumping water to Carson, that's not a correct statement, because Carson has the water rights and they have paid for the upsizing of both the pump as well as the pipe. So, you know, if it were going to be over appropriated, which is another term, But if it's over appropriated, the state engineer is the one that limits it. And he has not done that. And the reason he
Well,
has
you-
not
you
done
and
that,
I have-
is that we're
You and I have
below it.
disagreed on this point for 2 years now.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
you know, that's just the way it is.
All right. And you'll get your chance on this too. So are there any other questions or comments? So if there are no other questions or comments, we'd be looking for a motion. We'll take item 5 first.
Mr. Chair, I move to approve resolution 2020 R-054, a master plan map amendment, changing 39.4 acres of land from forest and range to single-family estates. Based on the Planning Commission's recommendation, the Community Development Staff report, the evidence presented, public comment, and the ability to make the required findings.
I will second.
A motion by Commissioner Walsh, a second by Commissioner Rice. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any nays?
Nay.
So motion carries 3-2. Okay, item number 6.
Mr. Chair, I would move to adopt ordinance 2020-1568, a zoning map amendment as presented based on the Planning Commission's recommendation, Community Development's report, the evidence presented, public comment, and the ability to make the required findings.
Will second also.
So a motion by Commissioner Walsh, a second by Commissioner Rice. Any further discussion on this particular issue? Seeing none. I would just make the comment that we're supporting also the Planning Commission, which is an important aspect of listening to the rest of the public. So with that in mind, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any nays?
Nay.
Okay, the motion carries 3-2. All right, so we'll move on to item 7. If I can get it down. Nope. Okay, item 7 for possible action. Discussion on the possible adoption of ordinance 2020-1572, a request for zoning map amendment from SFR 2, single family residential, 2-acre minimum lot size, to SFR 1, single family residential, 1-acre minimum lot size, for approximately 3.01 acres. The subject property is located at 1135 Centerville Lane, at the northeast corner of Centerville Lane and Pleasantview Drive in the Gardnerville Ranchos Community Plan area. The applicant is Jim Prosser, trustee of the Joyce A. Cancilia Trust, APN 1220-08-802-015. This is a second reading. Mr. Booth on behalf of Community Development and Ms. Cunningham on behalf of the applicant. 20-minute presentation. Mr. Booth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sam Booth, once again for the record. As you just read, sir, this is a zoning map amendment for 3.01 acres at the corner of Centerville Lane and Pleasantview Drive in the Ranchos. You can see on this map the site highlighted in blue. They're at the southeast corner of Centerville and Pleasantview. And excuse me for the slide saying, or excuse me, it is northeast corner of Centerville and Pleasantview, sorry. The master plan future land use of the site today is single family estate. And the master plan states that this designation is used in the periphery of urban areas and that the density is allowed to be and should be 1 to 2 acres per dwelling unit. The zoning of the property today is single-family residential 2 acre, requiring a 2 acre minimum. You can see that on the map here, highlighted in yellow. To the west of the property, across Centerville Lane, is Rocky Terrace Planned Development, which includes SFR 12,000 square foot lots. To the south, across Pleasantview Drive, is a portion of the Pleasantview subdivision, which has SFR 1/2 as well as SFR 2 zoning on it. And to the north and east of the property, again, is the yellow zoning there is SFR 2. The project site is located within the urban service boundary, and it would be served by the Gardenville Ranchos GID for water and sewer. However, the Ranchos GID has noted that it would still need to be annexed into their district, and that would take place at a subsequent meeting. We do have will serves from Frontier, Charter, Southwest, Gas, NV Energy, and they are saying that they're capable to serve the proposed subdivision. The applicant submitted a trip generation analysis that estimated the rezoning of the development would include 3 parcels potentially for a 41 average daily trips and 4 peak hour trips. Driveway access for the site would be limited around the intersection of Centerville and Pleasantview Drive, but that would be examined with the subsequent land division tentative subdivision map to come forward. This is a conceptual site plan that the applicant submitted for the site. You can see, as I stated, the existing lot today is 3 acres in size, 3.01, and they're showing 3 1-acre lots in the future if the zoning is approved. So the findings for approval of a zoning map amendment, these are on packet pages 558 through 559. There are findings A through D to be made for a zoning map amendment. Staff believes these findings could be made. However, the Planning Commission did not feel that the findings could be made, and the Planning Commission denied this application. And would note, Mr. Chairman, that Chairman of the Planning Commission, Kirk Walder, is on the line, and I think wishes to speak just in summary of the Planning Commission's hearing.
Okay. I'll get to Mr. Chair in just a second. Ms. Cunningham, did you have any remarks that you'd like to add or subtract from what Mr. Booth said?
I would like to make a few remarks. Sam, do you have my presentation, which I realize I should make short, but appreciate the chance to practice. So do you have that?
I do, just bear with me here. Okay.
Thank you. All right, good afternoon. I don't need to repeat a lot, but I want to say for the record, Kate Cunningham, R.O. Anderson Engineering. The applicant, as you know, is represented by her son, Jim Prosser, and they are seeking approval of a zoning map amendment for this 3-acre parcel so that they can develop 3 1-acre lots on the property. And as we have discussed, the current zoning is SFR2 and the proposed zoning is SFR1. The next slide is just a general location of the property, which I think you got a picture of that from Sam. But this is the point where I just want to say, as you know, the project was denied by the Planning Commission last month. And I want to take a minute to acknowledge that and acknowledge Mr. Slade's input on the use of the word adjacent in the justification I presented to the Planning Commission last month. While the parcels in the neighboring district to the east have the same underlying land use, and I'll show you that on the next map, the same proposed zoning, SFR1, is in that area, but the immediately adjacent parcel to the east is over 2 acres. So Mr. Slade made a valid point about what is immediately adjacent to the parcel. And in the next slide, the green area shows the underlying land use is shared between those 2 general areas. They're both single-family estate, kind of bordered by Centerville, Pleasantview Drive, and Drayton Boulevard. And if we go to the next slide, it just talks about, well, here, the proposed amendment is consistent with policies embodied in the adopted master plan. And some of these policies are relevant to some of the concerns that the Planning Commission pointed out. One is the concern about having appropriate public facilities. As Sam outlined, they have received letters from the relevant utilities and understand that the project would have to move to sewer and water service. And a location has been identified adjacent to Rocky Terrace where they might be able to engineer that connection. So it's not too far from the parcel, and it is understood that that will be required. In addition, they need protection from encroachment by incompatible activities, and that's something I hope to discuss briefly in a couple of further slides down, and have consistency with the master plan use, which it does. It would have single family estate, which does permit both SFR1 and SFR2 parcels. And the location has to be in an urban service area. And this area is in the urban service area, but would have to be annexed officially by GRGID in order to proceed with that effort. So the next slide just reiterates the point. Oh, this is the one I just talked about. And then the next slide reiterates the point about the underlying land use designation permits 1 or 2 acre lots as the zoning. And then the following slide talks about public utilities, public facilities, which I talked about before. And I don't know if, can you see my mouse? Do you see my mouse? Maybe not. Okay. Here's where Rocky Terrace is to the west of Centerville, west of the parcel. That's where we anticipate connecting to the sewer line. There's other options also. And as mentioned, there are letters of intent to serve from the various utilities. The finding C is next, and finding B and finding C were particularly troublesome for the Planning Commission. And so in their discussions about finding C, they focus quite a bit on what it is to be adjacent to another property. And there was a counting of how many properties that were adjacent were at 1 acre or lower. And I want to bring attention for a minute to the word compatible, which means able to exist or occur together without conflict. And so to the extent that the parcels north of the SFR1 proposed area that you see in the slide, the one on the farthest left touches 2 of those proposed parcels, or not immediately north, but above it. The larger parcels above it have another one above that I'm pointing to, but I don't know if you can see that. But they all touch either over here in the SFR1 subdivision or going north, they touch a 1 acre parcel. They are already comporting with a neighboring parcel with which they have been deemed compatible by historic decisions made by others to establish these next to each other. We don't have MFR housing here. We don't have an airport here. These are types that show an ability to exist or occur together without conflict. So I would argue that the relevance of compatibility can be established by showing that this type of compatibility already exists. Even south of the parcel for the 2 acre zoning south of Centerville and Pleasant Drive, there are some parcels that are adjacent to SFR 1/2, and they have been deemed compatible because those projects had been approved. And so I just wanted to make that point about compatibility. The next slide shows some of the non-conforming parcels in that 2 acre district, some that are below the 2 acre minimum. So they may be 1 acre, they may be 1.49 acres, but that many parcels are compatible with each other, and they do touch on larger parcels, and those parcels are compatible with them because they have been neighbors. The next picture shows sort of the dominance of these parcels that are less than 2 acres in this area, just emphasizing that this type of pattern of development is integrated with this area and the current districts, the SFR2 or SFR1 or the underlying single family estate. So in the last slide, which probably has some satellite imagery that's not entirely current, I just want to reiterate that the applicant requests approval of a zoning map amendment with the understanding that with your approval, other applications and review processes must follow. such as annexation to the GRGID district, approval of a tentative map, construction or bonding for any improvements required by the conditions of the tentative map, and the recording of a final map. This is the first step, and I welcome your follow-up questions. Thank you.
Mr. Walter.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Kirk Walder, Chairman of the Planning Commission, for the record. I think Sam Booth has two slides, and I'll be brief. He's done an excellent job explaining this agenda item. The first slide summarizes the actions of the Planning Commission. I won't read all those comments, but we debated the zoning map amendment for well over an hour, and 5-1 voted to deny the request. The next slide provides what I believe are the key sections of code. My written statement is in your supplemental materials, but I voted to deny the zoning based on the third required finding, letter C, which says that the proposed amendment should be compatible with the actual and master planned use of the adjacent properties. In this case, the master planned use, single family estate, which covers both SFR1 and SF2, qualifies. But the question that needs to be answered is, will rezoning to SF1 be compatible with the actual use of the adjacent properties? And to determine this, I think we first must determine which properties meet the county definition of abutting or adjacent, which is 2 or more parcels sharing a common boundary of at least 1 point. In my view, abutting and adjacent have different meanings, so the existing definition in code is a flaw that needs to be corrected. Adjacent is a more general term, which could mean nearby. But if we're to observe the rigid adherence to the code, we can only look at properties sharing a common boundary. In this case, the subject property is bordered on 2 sides by roads. So, are the properties across Centerville and Pleasantview adjacent? Staff argues that this definition is too narrow. But what if, instead of a road, most of the adjacent properties were across a river or a lake? And must all adjacent properties be compatible, a majority of them, or just some of them? County code is unclear. And what is compatible, as Kate said? Code does not require that the adjacent properties be of the exact same zoning. My vote against rezoning was based on the strictest interpretation of county code. That just left the 3 properties to the north and west, and only one of those has actual use of SF1. However, if one concludes that the code is vague and flawed, a case can be made that the rezoning would meet finding C, because the properties to the west and south, as well as a majority of properties in the vicinity, have actual use of SF1 or less. As we could find in other situations, it may be wise to judge cases like this by establishing a standard of what would a reasonable person conclude based on the facts and circumstances. Thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions.
And you didn't define who the reasonable people are.
The county commissioners.
Well done. Well done. All right.
I would also like to make another comment if I could.
Sure, Mr. Booth. Go ahead.
As Chairman Walder of the Planning Commission pointed out, staff does disagree with the opinions that the Planning Commission made at their hearing, and a bit concerned about setting a precedent of making that finding for the master plan amendment about being compatible with adjacent properties a rigid standard of matching the exact zoning of, as Mr. Slade pointed out and the Planning Commission discussed, properties that share a boundary, a common boundary with a lot. And the point being that it could cause issues for the Planning Commission or the board in the future if we have a parcel that's surrounded by, as Mr. Walder said, whether it's a river separated by a road or right of way. It's common in land use planning to look across the street to see what the adjacent zoning is. And, you know, once again, I'm referring to it myself as adjacent zoning. I think you can argue over a few points. One is what the applicant's argument was, is it compatible regardless of what the definition of adjacent is. I think they're making the argument that it's still compatible with what's surrounding it. But I think staff is making the argument that the properties across the street are adjacent properties. There is no zoning for a road or for right of way. And so in the void of zoning on that road, you would look to what the next zoning district is, which is across the street. And it's very common in land use planning that you would look to neighboring properties or you would look across the road. An example of that, I just pulled for the presentation and downtown Minden here. This is the Arts Council building. You can see is surrounded by First Street, County Road, and 395. And if we were to take the opinion, or the commission was, that this parcel has no adjacent parcels because it does not share a common boundary with any adjacent parcels, it would be very difficult, if not impossible, to make that finding that it's compatible with adjacent parcels. And therefore, the applicant or the owner of this property could never rezone the property, and the commission could be robbing them of that opportunity to rezone in the future as a downtown area develops or as land uses change or those type of things. And many other situations like this, but just trying to reiterate to the commission that I believe in the past, the practice has been that we do look across the street, across the right of way to see what's the adjacent zoning of those properties when we're evaluating whether it's compatible or not.
Mr. Dave.
Yeah, Sam, looking at your example here, can you bring it back up, please?
Yes, sir. Sorry about that.
Yeah, being along 395 kind of makes this a moot point, I think, because obviously if you're on 395, you want it to be some kind of commercial property. You wouldn't want any kind of housing there. So I think that zoning this to anything else would be ridiculous. So I don't think your argument is very valid. Thank you.
Well, I totally understand that, Commissioner Nelson, and would just say that please don't pay attention to this exact location. Just the fact that you could end up with a parcel similar to this that's surrounded on all sides by right of way. And then the question is, how would you determine what is adjacent to that parcel? Totally valid point about this one in particular, though.
Looks like a general commercial to me all the way.
Commissioner Walsh.
Yeah, Dave, I beg to differ with you. There are residential uses on Highway 395 all along 395, so it's not all commercial.
It should be.
Well,
Commissioner Rice.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm reluctant to go against the Planning Commission when the vote was as strong as it was. And I have the greatest faith in Mr. Walter in being reasonable and being thoughtful. So I'm kind of reluctant to overrule the Planning Commission. I think that this could be brought back to them for further modification or whatever and looked at again. But at this point, I'm afraid I can't support this.
Okay. Mr. Booth. Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Walsh, did you want to?
Well, yeah, I've got a lot of comments on this. I've lived in this area and I'm very familiar with this particular project. And frankly, I have a unique perspective of this neighborhood. That property has been a weed patch since at least the early 2000s and probably before that. The neighborhood has a diverse configuration, there's no doubt, a lot of different lot sizes. And when I use the term neighborhood, I'm including, as has been said before, Rocky Terrace, Pleasantview, which are separated, of course, from the property by Centerville Lane, but have urban size lots that are considerably smaller in size. And then there's the adjacent Silver Ranch and Suncrest developments that are either 1 acre or half-acre lots. I'm not sure what their zoning designation is, but it's actually one acre or half-acre lots. There are some 2 acre parcels to the north of the subject property, and And having driven that as late as yesterday, I can tell you that those 2-acre parcels, it's kind of a hard zoning. Those 2-acre parcels, some of them have wheat patches in their backyard. They use maybe 1/3 of that property for their residence, and the rest has just gone to weeds, and that's not good for invasive species. Now, although homeowners of 2-acre parcels might like distance between their neighbors, the fact of the matter is, the reality is, they can't afford to landscape or farm a good portion of their property, and from looks of it, they can't even afford weed spray. According to staff and the master plan future use, I guess, designation is single-family estate, which says 1 or 2 acres. I respect Mr. Walder trying to adhere to the letter of the law, but in my opinion, adjoining, abutting, adjacent, in my mind, it's a gray area. You know, now we're here 24 years after the master plan and zoning designations were established for this property, but we really don't know exactly why. I read Mrs. McKinnon's statement in her public comment to the Planning Commission on August 11th, which gave us a little understanding of what's gone on. She's lived in the area for 50 years. She told us that the McGill Ranch was sold off piecemeal, but then since that has happened, everything primarily is 1 acres, and she actually supports this change. Driving around the county and looking at other 2-acre parcels, many appear to have the majority of their property in a weed patch. And some of those parcels are adjacent to agricultural neighborhoods or agricultural lands. Part of the ranch is a perfect example of this. And of course, GRE is another example where many parcels fall into this category. And perhaps the 2-acre zoning designation actually needs to be reviewed. For those of you who took time to visit and understand the neighborhood as it currently exists, you would see that there is an eclectic mix of lot sizes there. You have urban-sized lots, 12,000 feet. You have half acre, you have 1 acre, you have 2 acres. So it's very mixed. And I think looking at it from a logical standpoint, the neighbors and frankly the county would be better off if the property were developed, and in my opinion, into a 3 1-acre parcels that conform to the majority of the neighborhood, and that will be served by the municipal services, as we just heard. Because the definition of adjacent or adjoining or abutting in the code, which in my opinion is in gray area, I think I would, and for the reasons I just mentioned, I think I would support this zone change. I support reasonableness in our approach to land use. And this is just a vacant piece of land that really needs to be developed for the good of the neighborhood. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Booth, can you bring up the diagram that you show the property? You have a drawing of it to show the property in the northeast corner, and you outline it on the ground. It's very close to the one you have right now. There you go. That's bigger, better. Let us say for the moment that this were approved. How do they obtain egress and ingress from the parcels that are to the east of what would be the 1st acre parcel? Do they do it off of Pleasantview Road or whatever that is?
Mr. Chairman, so the subject property, how would they obtain access to it, to those parcels?
Yeah.
I have a better image here. Let me see if I can. This one here was the conceptual plan. So as I said, and when our engineering department reviewed this conceptual plan, obviously there were concerns about locating driveways too close to Centerville and Pleasantview Drive's intersection. And I believe there's a turn lane on Pleasantview Drive that's just right here south of lot number 1. So because it's stacking, you wouldn't want a driveway there. And there's a required setback from the intersection. So it's likely that lot 1 and lot 2 would share an access driveway to keep that away. And I think we said that access would be restricted to no driveways accessing Centerville Drive here on the west.
And what about lot 3?
Lot 3 could potentially then, so if lot 1 and 2 shared a driveway, lot 3's driveway would have to be a certain distance from those 2 driveways. And so it would probably be on the far east side of the property there. Or somewhere near the lot.
On Pleasantview, right?
Yes, sir.
Does that mean that Pleasantview is going to have the speed limit reduced?
I haven't heard that from our engineering department, but I can say that they haven't done a thorough review on this conceptual plan, and because this is just a zoning map amendment. But if a subdivision map were submitted, that's something we definitely look at, but I don't know about that possibility.
Well, if a subdivision map were discussed, it'd be an administrative hearing and community development, would it not?
That's a great point. Excuse me, I misspoke, Chairman. A parcel map. If this were 3 lots, it would be a parcel map. It would go to the administrative hearing panel. You're correct.
So we wouldn't hear it again.
That's correct. A parcel map can be appealed to the Planning Commission.
Okay. This whole area is the older area that going north from these 3 lots or potential 3 lots is probably the oldest area there. And because Pleasantview came in later and the stuff across the street has been developed later too. Is there a requirement for the county to pave the road that comes off of Centerville and goes south?
See if I can see that.
It's offset at the intersection there.
Right there, Rubio Way.
Yeah.
That is part of the Pleasantview development. And I don't believe that there's a requirement to pave Rubio Way. I believe the development, that section of Pleasantview is finalized, and the SIP has been finalized for that road. So it's and I do believe it's a private road to the development.
Oh, okay. I see Mr. Taylor giving you a thumbs up. Wish he'd give it to me, but anyway. He's probably got a finger, but it's anyway. The area to the north, which is, in my view, adjacent to it, is kind of eclectic, as Commissioner Walsh stated. Is there a situation where eventually I think all of them are going to want to do this kind of subdivision of some sort? So is it to the county's advantage to rezone that area SFR1 as opposed to doing piecemeal? Because if this is approved, as soon as it is, I can imagine these other, particularly the one to the east of the lot line, would want to be able to subdivide their property.
See if I can zoom in on this image for you. And it is a little bit fuzzy as I zoom in, so I apologize for that, Chairman. You can see, so again, this entire area from Pleasantview north to Centerville as it turns to the east is zoned R2. Many of these properties up here to the north are 1 acre or 1 point and some change acres. And were subdivided historically. And I think that's the neighbor that Commissioner Walsh said he had spoken to that was in favor of the request. They had described to the Planning Commission at the hearing just the history of some of these properties being subdivided, I believe before the SFR2 zoning was in place. They're at the northeast corner of the lot here. This is a 1 acre property. And then there are two 2 acre properties, or 2 and some change, again, the directly north and then directly to the east, where you can see the dirt bike track there, and then the property to the north. The main problem, and again, the Planning Commission did discuss this in their hearing, is access to those properties. And you can see that most of the lots that were subdivided in the past and broken out are behind the lots to the front that face on Centerville.
Right.
And we, of course, would require a full improvement and a paved road dedicated public right-of-way once you get the third lot off of the same driveway. And so I think the parcel directly to the north, if they were to split their property, and you can see the east half of that is unused. So if they were to split their property, a road would have to be put in beyond just a private driveway.
But they would have to get it rezoned also.
Yes, that's correct. And so, excuse me, the second or first part of your question was about the county's ability or initiative to do that. I don't think it's something that the county has taken on too often in the past to go in proactively and rezone properties. We would need the consent of each of those property owners to do so. But I could imagine if there were, contiguous property owners all in that area who all endorsed the idea of doing that, that an application could be combined by each of those and supported by the county for that. The real tool that the county has in planning for, the future division of the land and those type of things is the master plan future land use. And as the applicant pointed out, and we pointed out in our staff report, the future land use allows 1 or 2 acre lots. And I think that's why you've seen this occur this way over time. Had the master plan land use just 2 acre lots were the only thing that was allowed, you may not have seen it develop into 1 acre lots.
I think that the Planning Commission provided a thoughtful review of this. I think they did us a service by trying to nail down what is adjoining and abutting. I agree with Mr. Slade that these things are vague, but we're dealing with real life and real property and real people here. It seems to me that the 2 land use items we had before showed that there's an ability within the county to have different but supporting types of zoning in the same area. I see no reason why this doesn't fall under that. If you go the hardline discussion as Mr. Walter was talking about and say, well, it's not adjoining, so it can't be abutting, and therefore it is not allowed. I'm not sure that that's what the intent of the regulation is, that every property has to have the same designation as the property next to it. At what point do you change any of that? And how flexible are you? In that discussion, I go back to Ms. Casey's comments on item 6, in that it gets overwhelmed by what's happened with the rest of the developments around there. When this was assigned, no one thought that Rocky Terrace was going to be there. And now Rocky Terrace is there. And on the other side, all of the other land that was sold has been developed into 1 or 1.5 acre or half acre in some cases properties. And so now we are faced with a person that wants to subdivide their land. It is their land. we control what they can do on it by virtue of the zoning. And I think one of the things that mitigates for this and should be the deciding factor for those that are really concerned about water is that we would be getting properties off of a well, and we would be putting them on, well, I don't think there's a well on the property, but we would be putting properties on the municipal system. And as was shown by the presentation by Mr. James, by doing so, we are actually saving water because we are putting people on meters. And this is an important aspect of it. So in that regard, because Grid would have to adopt this area, would Grid adopt just those 3 acres, or would Grid have the ability to take the entire area and adopt it and then put it all under county, or in this case, municipal system? Can they do that? Does anybody know the answer to that question?
We have 2 DAs that can back me up here, I believe, on the line. But it is in the Rancho service area, but they'd asked that it must be annexed into their district. But I believe that is an application that the property owner has to make to the district. So similar to our zoning application, I think, if several property owners got together to make that annexation application, that could be possible. But typically those are heard by the Ranchos GID on a case-by-case basis as an applicant comes forward and requests it.
There is a 300-foot rule for sewer. I think it's 300 feet. If there's a sewer line within 300 feet of your property, don't you have to hook up by NDEP requirements? Mr. Dallaire, do you know the answer to that question?
Yeah, I do. Thank you, Chairman. This is Tom Dallaire, Community Development Director. It is actually 2,000. If they're within 2,000 feet and they can connect to their subdivision, then we can request them to extend that. The problem is in code it allows that 300 feet that you were referring to. They have to connect if it's within that 300 feet of their property. So should the sewer line get extended across down Pleasantview, let's say from Rocky Terrace, and that sewer line is in and somebody's system fails in that area, then they would be required. They would not be able to get a permit to rebuild their septic system in their repair area. They would be required to connect to that sewer line that was there if it was in front of, or within 300 feet of their property. When you look at the grid boundary, the annexation is typically only the parcels that are being developed. And because those parcels around this site already have homes on them, it looks like all of them except for one of the 1 acre parcels actually has a house on it. And then this subject site does not have a house or a well on it today. That Grid wouldn't be able to annex everybody in there because they're not providing any services to those homes. But they do have adjoining boundaries between the subdivision to the right of this whole block of 2 acre parcels and Rocky Terrace. Of course, they serve and have annexed Rocky Terrace into their service area, as well as the half acre parcels to the south of this site. They have annexed those parcels as well. So it's kind of being piecemealed together now because of how far they're out from the main road of Tillman Avenue. And there's a number of parcels around in that area between Tillman and this site that are not in the GID service area. So I think as parcels are divided or there's some infrastructure required, because right now they could build a house on the 3 acre parcel, put a well and septic on it, and it would just be a building permit. We wouldn't have really, that's the only review we have of it. They can go ahead and put that sewer and the septic system in and the well in because they are not annexed into the GID improvement district. Did that help or make it more confusing? But
Well, that was a long answer to just the basic question. I'll get to you in just a second, Mr. Ingles. What I'm concerned about is if we approve this and they drag water and sewer on the north end of this development, then those houses that are directly above it would be within 300 feet easily.
Right, but we couldn't.
Are we forcing them then to hook up?
Only if their septic system fails.
Okay. Commissioner Ingles?
I feel like we're playing a serious game of Monopoly here.
Yeah.
The pursuant to what Commissioner Penzel said earlier, it's important that we take into consideration the views of the Planning Commission. That's one item. In regard to weeds, I live adjacent to an area where everybody is on a 2-acre lot. They have nice homes. The house is set back. The yards are well maintained. Some of them have livestock, horses, goats, whatever. And we don't have weeds. Well, we have weeds, but we work on keeping them under control. And this is pretty much true all in the adjacent areas down here, which are all 2-acre lots. And our ranch is on 5 acres, and everybody here works on the weeds. So I don't agree with that argument as being a mitigating reason or justification to go forward in authorizing the change in an amendment to the master plan. The other thing is that the grid was already over appropriated. And so the amount of water that these people would be taking compared to being on the grid or something is about 6 1/2 dozen to the other. In regard to if we did this and a hookup for these people down 300 feet away or whatever it is, we could be looking at a substantial cost for that hookup for these people. So all things being considered, I think that there was a prudent decision made by the Planning Commission because we're going to set a precedent by approving this. And this gives a 100% increase to the developer. And under these circumstances, I'm opposed.
Okay.
Chairman Penzel, can I speak?
Certainly.
Cynthia Gregory from the Douglas County District Attorney's Office. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I feel I need to interject as to some of the comments that have been made with regards to the code being vague and flawed or gray. That's simply not the case. And I don't believe that those are correct statements with regards to it. The code is very clear with regards to the definition of abutting or adjacent. It says 2 or more parcels. A roadway is a street, an easement, a thoroughfare. It is not a parcel. So therefore, the definition goes on to explain that it can be a common boundary, and that common boundary is often a street. So while I know there's been some suggestion that we may need to tighten up that code, you can do that in the future. But under the current definition, I think it's very clear that with regards to adjacent and the definition that the county has in the past, and in fact, this board did in the preceding item, you look across the street. And so I'm a bit concerned about some of the comments that have been made being a little bit inconsistent with staff's past interpretation and the board's past interpretation of abutting and adjacent. I know that Planning Commissioner Walder talked about, well, I think it should be a reasonable person standard. Well, that's not the case. The law says basically the agency gets to interpret its own regulations and that the court gives great deference to the agency's interpretation. And up until this point, the agency's interpretation, both from the board and community development, has been that you look across the street, that's an abutting or a common boundary. And so I don't think you can just, when you're analyzing this, look at one definition, abutting or adjacent, and say that's the end of the hunt, because it says 2 or more parcels. Well, if you go on to see a street's not a parcel, it's a thoroughfare. If you go on to look at lot, which is often a parcel, and that's a parcel, tract, or area of land established by plat subdivision to be used to be developed. Well, as stated earlier, roads aren't quote unquote developed for density. And so I too have great respect for the Planning Commission. I've sat with them for 10 years. I'm just a little bit concerned that there's a proposal to have a new interpretation. And I think if you want to do that, that's perfectly fine, but you need to go back and amend the code before you actually implement that. And I am concerned about if you were to be challenged and the defensibility. So I don't know if you're willing, if you would like me to talk more with the commissioners, I'm happy to do that, but I prefer to do that in an attorney-client privileged session.
Chairman?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Ms. Gregory, in the law, you know that there's the spirit of the law and the letter of the law. Is that correct? Did they teach you that in law school?
Well, they taught, I certainly learned about interpretation in law school.
Okay. I learned that there's the spirit of the law and the letter of the law. And in legal terms, and no matter what we do, there's always some way that isn't exact and can't be done exactly right and meet all of the conditions of everything under the sun. So we're dealing with, maybe some of this is a little subjective, but the law is giving us guidance. And hence we have an understanding and trying to work within those parameters. Does that make sense to you?
What makes sense to me is that there are 4 findings that have to be made in order to approve this. You have to make all 4. That's up to you. I'm just questioning if you're saying if the finding is solely based on using this new definition of adjacent, that is extremely concerning. If there are other reasons that you have to deny it, then absolutely put those on the record. And that is within your discretion.
Thank you.
Okay, any further comments? Let me see if I see any.
Mr. Chair, if there's no further comments, I would like to move to deny the adoption of ordinance 2020-1572 based on the Planning Commission's recommendation, the evidence presented, public comment, and the inability to make the required findings.
Second.
So I have a motion by Commissioner Nelson and a second by Commissioner Ingalls. Now, if I'm understanding the attorney, you're going to have to cite what finding you don't agree with if you vote to deny this. Is that correct, Madam?
That's always our recommendation, is to put on the record for purposes of legal review what findings couldn't be met.
Okay, and if you agree that the findings can be met, do you have to elaborate on each finding?
No, I think you could simply refer to the staff's original
Staff report? Mm-hmm.
Correct, as well as the applicant's findings.
Okay. Okay. So are there any questions before I call for the vote? Then we'll do this vote a little bit differently. We'll call for the vote, and each person must state either they agree or disagree and why they agree or disagree according to the findings that they agree or disagree with. Is that understandable? Did I make that clear? Okay, let me get back up.
So the motion is to deny the
application. Yeah.
Okay.
So I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Let's go back over the motion is to deny it. So you are voting for denying it. Is that correct?
Correct.
Right.
Okay. I'm going to withdraw my aye. Let's go. Dave, did you vote yay or nay?
Yay.
And your reasoning?
As with the planning commission, they said the findings could not be met, and I agree with that.
I voted that no, and I believe that the staff report findings are correct and that the findings can be met. Mr. Ingles?
I voted to deny it in accordance with the planning commission. And you said earlier that we need to take consideration of what the planning commission presents.
Correct. Mr. Walsh?
I vote no on the motion based on the ability of the applicant to meet the findings based on the staff report.
Mr. Rice?
I vote nay, and sorry, Kirk. I believe that the findings have been met.
Okay, and so that's all five of us, and we have 3 nays and 2 yays. So the motion to deny it has been defeated. And Ms. Gregory, do we have to do anything else?
Yes, Chairman. If you want to take action to approve, I would recommend that you make a formal motion. And the only action that's been taken at this point is to deny it. So I would request another motion.
Another motion, but of course. Mr. Walsh? There is an alternative motion. Do you want me to read it? I'll move it. Recommended motion from staff, move to approve the adoption of ordinance 2020-1572 based on the staff report, the evidence presented, public comment, and the ability to make the required findings. Is there a second?
I'll second.
So we have a second from Commissioner Rice. So Chair made the motion, a second from Commissioner Rice. Any further discussion? I would elaborate that while I said that we should support the Planning Commission, I listened to what Mr. Walter said intently. I read what he said, and there was a lot of disagreement as to how that should go. And I believe that the thought that we're changing horses in the middle of the stream as to how to define that is not consistent with our policies in the past. So therefore, I vote to approve it.
So what you're saying is just disregard what the planning commission says and why have a planning commission?
No, I'm not saying that. If I wanted to say that, I would say exactly.
Because a minute ago you said we have to work with the planning commission and their decisions. And now you're changing that. And
No,
so
I'm
are
not.
some of the
No, I'm not changing it for you because you're not flexible, but for the rest of us that are flexible, yes. All right. Any other comments?
I take umbrage with that comment.
I understand that. Any other comments? Okay, then I'll call for the vote. All those in favor of the motion to approve signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any nays?
Nay.
Is there a specific finding that you disagree with? That it can't be made?
Yeah, it's not the adjacent issue. Absolutely.
Okay.
This wasn't even on the agenda. This wasn't even part of it.
Ms. Gregory, can you comment on that? He's alleging it wasn't on the agenda.
I believe that the item that you read in did deal with the zoning. Possible action includes both denial and approval. And so that under the open meeting law, this item was properly agendized for either approval or denial. And the Planning Commission is advisory. I'll just note that for the record.
Okay, thank you. So motion carries 3-2. And Mr. Ingles, did you want to provide a reason that it doesn't meet one of the findings?
Okay, I stated my position.
Okay, fine. All right. So at this point, we'll take a 10-minute break and we will resume with what would have been item 8. We'll move that item 9 to item 8, and then we'll go back to visit the appointment. So we'll take a 10-minute break as of 3:29. Thank you very much, gentlemen. 5 commissioners have returned. So we will proceed. Let the record reflect that all 5 commissioners have returned, and we will proceed to item 9.
Okay.
Which is for possible discussion and action. I'm sorry, for possible action. Discussion on application from Dennis Belly to abandon approximately 4,834 square feet of a non-exclusive road and utility easement, ROW, on Henning Lane, located at 1620 Saratoga Street in Minden, Nevada. APN 1420-26-301-025, DP 20-0066. Mr. Hutchings.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Jeremy Hutchings with Douglas County Engineering. I'm going to share my screen here. Give that a second to pop up. Okay, so as you read into the record, Mr. Chairman, we're at 1620 Saratoga Street, out in the Johnson Lane area. So he's just off of Saratoga Street. You're looking at a graphical representation of the project area. The highlighted red is roughly the existing right-of-way that I think it's pronounced Belli, that Dennis Belli has requested a petition to abandon. The applicant has provided notices from all the utility companies that there's no utilities in the area, so they're good with the abandonment. A little bit of background. Let me flip over one screen to show you a little bit of context. So in context, Henning Lane ends, practically speaking, kind of at the end of Terry Ann Street, right here. Technically, there's right away down through here. I'll show you a photo next. There's no street there. The right of way is basically right in this area where the owner has his driveway, and it stops essentially right here, kind of right in front of his garage. For context, the existing parcels to the north already have access out to Esau. There's no real possibility to extend Henning Lane any further to the north. I'm gonna flip back over. Just want to show you a couple site photos to give you an idea of what it looks like on the ground. So here you're standing on Saratoga, and you're facing northerly. The abandonment area is basically right here that he's requesting. You can see he's got a shop or a garage or some middle building structure here that kind of right away dead ends into. And here is if you face south on the existing, sitting in the same spot but facing south, you can see this is Henning Lane as it exists. The right of way exists today. It's actually fenced off. So the potential that the county is going to want to extend this any further north is essentially zero, in my opinion. The map also, I'll bring to your attention in the staff report, was shown. Flip up a few things if you can bear with me here. Record of survey to support boundary line adjustment noted that the road easement was to be abandoned at a later date. So the original parcel line was essentially where I'm tracing around with the hand on the cursor. And this little strip was kind of in that western side of that parcel. So when the BLA occurred, it looked like the intent was to abandon this little stub section and just never get done. Flip back over to so you can see again, this is the graphical representation of the area to be abandoned. Did get some public comment from, and I apologize to Mr. White. Mr. Terry White is an adjoining owner, or adjoining or abutting. I think one both the same in this case. But I incorrectly used the pronoun she instead of he in the staff report. But Mr. White made the letter, and that is in the supplemental staff report packet. I'll share it with you now as well. It's more, his letter didn't have a specific concern that I could address. It was more of a general concern about the county's willingness to abandon the right of way, but really the test is whether it's going to be any public benefit for us. And I really find that abandoning this is not going to be an issue. There's no public benefit to maintaining it. So I'm recommending that we approve the petition to abandon. And I'm happy. I know Mr. Rubin is from R.O. Anderson I believe he's still on the line, and he may want to add something more. I'm happy to answer any questions, but as the applicant's representative, he may want to add something more, but I haven't covered it adequately in his opinion. My recommendation is to approve the abandonment, and I'm happy to answer any questions that the board has.
Okay. I don't see Mr. Rubin on here. There he is. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have really anything to add to that. I think in context, if you look at it, there's plenty of access to the other parcels. It's not going to impede anybody's ability to gain access to a public road in the future should they choose to exercise their zoning that they currently have.
Okay. Yes, sir. Mr. Engel, please. Go ahead.
Mr. Rubin, in that diagram, there was is that a house that's next to the easement?
Can you pull that up again, Jeremy, so I can see it?
Yep, 1 second. Are you talking about here, Chairman Engel?
Yeah, right in there. Is that?
And that's a single family home.
Is that the applicant's home?
Yes.
And so this whole parcel really belongs to the applicant?
Yes.
How did this ever happen? Okay.
I think just to answer that question, if I can jump back in, Commissioner Engels, I was wondering that myself, but when you look at the original parcel layout, the parcel, I believe, you can see this text in here, it said old parcel line. And so the old parcel used to be shaped like this.
Oh, okay.
And Henning used to go up and stub at the end of that property line. And then the previous owner, or one of the previous owners, adjusted the boundary. So now it goes up like this. And this little section right here makes little to no sense. And
how did you ever find out about this?
I'm sorry?
How did you ever find out about this?
Well, partly from the applicant's application, but also you can go back and look at old parcel maps and records of survey that come in that get recorded. So you have to dig a little bit.
Oh, okay.
Does that answer your question, I hope?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions? Mr. Taylor.
Yes, Sam Taylor on behalf of Douglas County DA. I just wanted to clarify that under NRS 278-480, the standard is that the board must approve the abandonment unless approving the abandonment would cause material harm to the public. I just wanted to make that clear. That is the standard under statute.
Thanks, Sam.
All right. Thank you. Any further question from any of the board members?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, if there are no further questions, I think we're probably ready for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the petition to abandon approximately 4,834 square feet of a non-exclusive road and utility easement located at 1620 Saratoga Street in Minden, as proposed under DP 20-0066.
Second.
So we have a motion by Commissioner Rice and a second by Commissioner Walsh. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Nays. No nays. The motion carries 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. What? We have a report from the county manager concerning coronavirus funding. We can listen to that, or we can try and go back to item number 1.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
regarding item number 1,
Yes, sir.
I apologize for the miscommunication between myself and my staff. I thought we were going to have all 3 members on this meeting. We do have Timothy McCoy. He has joined us, but I learned that Kenneth Bezich had reported to staff that he had a conflict that he could not get out of to be at this meeting. So I don't know how you want to proceed, if you want to talk to the 2 that are present and proceed, or if you would like to postpone this to a future meeting when we can have all of them present.
And any actions on the part of the board? Any suggestions, Commissioner Walsh? You must be.
I think that in fairness to Mr. Maxwell, we ought to postpone this to a time when we can have all 3 applicants interviewed.
I concur.
Commissioner Ingles?
I don't agree. We've got 2 applicants. We can vote on putting them on the board, and this item can be taken care of and done.
Agreed.
Well, if you want to vote on the applicants now, I don't have a problem with that if that's what the majority of the board wants to do. But it's really 2-2, so I'm willing to go either way. Let's. Did you say that you can get a hold of the 3rd applicant, Mr. Cates? But he isn't responding now, or he's not going to be available at all?
He is not available at all today.
And this was the staff's fault, not his fault?
It's my understanding he reported it to staff. I was not aware of that.
I think if it's a staff issue, that we shouldn't penalize him for not being available. So I would say let's postpone this and bring it up at the next. Can we do it the next meeting or next convenient time when you can schedule everybody?
Yeah, hopefully we can schedule them all at the next meeting.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we put off the issue until our next meeting.
Second.
Table the discussion until the next meeting?
Correct.
And is there a second?
Yes, I second.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any nays?
Nay.
So motion carries 3-2. All right. Then we'll move on to item number 10. I'll read that into the record then. For possible action, discussion to accept an $8,931,061 coronavirus relief fund federal assistance grant from the state of Nevada Governor's Finance Office and approve the preliminary spending plan submitted to the state of Nevada by staff. Mr. Cates.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a presentation I'd like to walk you through. Get that going here. Okay, can everybody see my presentation?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. So let me get you up to speed on where we're at with our coronavirus relief funding. We can get my slides to go forward. There we go. Okay, first couple of slides are just review. You've seen this before. The county's been earmarked by the state for $8.9 million of the CARES Act Coronavirus Relief Fund. That was a special allocation for state and local governments. It's for necessary expenditures incurred due to the public emergency with respect to COVID-19. Costs not accounted for in the most recent budget as of March 27th are eligible, and costs incurred between March 1st and the end of December are eligible. And I've covered this before about necessary expenditures, so I won't repeat that. Okay, so where we're at with the state process, as I've reported previously, it was the beginning of June that we were contacted by the governor's office and informed that the distribution would be coming. We did receive a submittal packet from the governor's finance office a month later on July 11th. That had requirements for the county to file a funding expenditure plan, eligibility certification letter, and terms and conditions acknowledgement. And the letter from the governor's finance office and the funding plan, the eligibility certification, terms and conditions are all included in your backup. I submitted those documents on July 23rd. Speed was of the essence so that we could get in the queue for that funding. The state said they would release 50% of the funds, a little less than $4.5 million immediately. As I said, we submitted on the 23rd. I just heard this morning that we have received those funds. According to the state's guidelines, those funds must be spent or, quote, plan to be spent by September 1st. Then the state will release the remaining 50% of funds, either on a reimbursement basis or upon approval of a detailed spending plan. So they're going to give it to us in two different pots, and we need to spend the first pot, or at least have a clear plan for it to be spent by September 1st, which is a little over 3 weeks away. So I can't emphasize how fast the clock is ticking on this money. These funds will be subject to audit review as part of the county's annual financial audit. So they will be thoroughly reviewed for adherence to the state's terms and conditions to make sure they are all allowable. No matter who we give these funds to in the form of a subgrant, the county will be held accountable by the state for their expenditure. And if they're not properly documented to an auditor's satisfaction, they will demand those funds back. So the next slide shows you the preliminary spending plan that we submitted. This is also in your packet. It's part of the spending plan letter that we sent them. We are looking at allocation of the entire amount. For some of these categories, I'll go into each of these in more detail, but for some of these categories, we already have incurred expenditures. For instance, the payroll figure of $3 million, we've spent about $1.5 million. That has legitimately been coded to COVID-19. So some of these are actuals and some of these are projected, but we wanted to show that we had a plan for all the money. And this is preliminary. I think as we go through this, we're going to end up shuffling some money around, but this was our preliminary plan we submitted to the state. So the payroll expenses, that is primarily for public safety, public health, and human services employees that were working on COVID-19 related activities. It's not wholesale for all of those staff. They have to have been doing things related to that. Emergency leave, there's emergency leave defined in the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. We did grant administrative leave to staff during the initial shutdown that went on for a few weeks. So we had about $500,000 in expenses there that we can claim and get reimbursement for. PPE, supplies, and retrofit. These are county expenses primarily for personnel and buildings. We've been supplying PPE to staff and to customers that come into county buildings. We've had various cleaning supplies expenses, as well as retrofit for our facilities, things like plexiglass at our counters, ways to separate staff at common work areas, that sort of thing. excuse me, I had to good slide there. Forgive me. Okay, the next one I want to talk a little bit more detail about. This is the small business grant program that we're proposing. We're working with NACO. Excuse me. We're working with NACO to hire a nonprofit vendor to create and administer this program. Clark County received their funding directly from the feds, and they set up a similar program that we're modeling this after. And as a result of multiple NACO meetings and some workshops, we've come up with this common process for those counties that want to participate in this. And I can't remember the exact number. I want to say there's about 7 counties that are participating in this or plan to participate in this. So the vendor that NACO is planning to hire will create the applications for the small businesses. They'll develop eligibility guidelines. They'll process the grant applications. They'll create a portal, a common portal for grant submission. And they will score and rank the applications. And they'll also ensure that grant funds are awarded for allowable expense. And I do want to make clear, although we would be participating with multiple counties, Douglas's county's money would be earmarked for Douglas's county business. There will be no commingling of funds. In fact, there'll be some variation among counties as to criteria. So although we have one vendor, this would be Douglas County's program and not directly tied to any other county.
So Peyton and everyone else, they left early. And so I also left early, but I also got 2 of my
Kathy.
classes in first aid class.
Kathy Lewis, you're on the speaker.
Okay, sorry about that. So as part of this budget, we're planning on making $1 million commitment from Douglas County out of this pot of money to get this program going. Eligible expenses under this program would be, there's a couple categories, working capital. This would be funding to help pay for things like rent, payroll, utilities, inventory, taxes, some examples. Any personal protective equipment or similar type of equipment that were needed to for their operations, as well as any retrofits to their facilities to comply with social distancing and other COVID-19 related directives. So eligible businesses, there's a few criteria that we're trying to establish. Number one, you have to have a business license. Home-based businesses, with operational needs within Douglas County with grant funds. I'm sorry, this is poorly worded. Let me try to explain this. So if a business is based in Douglas County and they're going to use the grant funds for operations in Douglas County, those would be eligible. Sole proprietors and home-based businesses would be eligible. And they need to be in business for at least 6 months prior to March 15th. The vendor would go through that determination as well. And they must demonstrate financial hardship. For instance, May to June revenue losses, so they can show that they've been impacted by COVID-19. And again, that's part of the service the vendor would provide. And businesses that have previously received small SBA funding, either the EIDL and PPP funding, they could also apply, but they would be given a lower priority. There was some question in the counties whether if they got an SBA loan, whether they should be eligible for this at all. And I think the experience for Clark County is that excluded too many businesses. So we want to give all businesses a shot for that, even if they did get that other funding. We just have to make sure that there's no double dipping. And since they'd already received funds, we would probably give them a little bit lower priority in the scoring criteria. So the size of the grant awards that we're talking about, the criteria we're trying to establish, for businesses with less than 5 people, they could get a working capital grant for up to $5,000. 5 to 19 employees would be up to $10,000, and 20 to 50 employees would be $15,000. I'm sorry, 20 to 50,000. 50,000. I'm sorry, I'm not saying this very well. 20 to 50 employees, you would get $15,000. up to 15,000. Employers with 50 or less employees represent over 97% of county businesses. So it would really give a shot at a lot of businesses to be eligible for this. PPE and retrofit grants would be limited to $5,000 for any employer with up to 50 employees. Kind of the timeline that we're looking at, preliminary, August 17th is the goal to get guidelines and an application available for businesses. August 24th is the target date for the program to be open for applications. And then we would be looking at mid-September for the first round of awards. And there could be additional awards after that. If we didn't get enough applicants, there was still money available. So that's the small business grant program. I'm ready to move on unless anybody has questions about that. I know that one's a little different than just reimbursing the county for their costs. Are there any questions about this, or should I continue?
Yeah.
Commissioner Rice.
Would private contractors qualify for this? By that, I mean beauticians, barbers, people who teach yoga classes, people who are paid. They work out of a shop, but it's not their shop, but they're not paid a salary.
That is an excellent question. I believe the answer is yes. I wish I had Lisa Granahan on the call to confirm that, but I believe that is correct.
Thank you.
If that's not correct, I will update you, sir, but I will clarify that with Lisa Granahan.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that if sole proprietors and home-based businesses are eligible, I would think those contractors like that would be too, personally.
Yes, I agree, and I think I've discussed that with her, but I just want to make sure before I said definitively.
Patrick, could you email me this PowerPoint presentation?
Absolutely. We'll upload it as supplemental, but I can email it to you separately as well.
Thank you.
Patrick?
Yes, sir.
This presentation, are your guidelines, or those are the guidelines coming from like NACO, or how's this working?
So these are the guidelines that we developed at the county. Lisa Granahan really took the lead on that. And it was a collaborative effort with NACO and the other participating counties. I know Lisa talked directly with folks at Clark County. I do understand that some counties have some variation in their criteria, but these are specific to Douglas County, developed by our Economic Vitality Program.
And a couple more questions. This all has to be ready to go in like 2 weeks, and the money has to be dispersed by September 1st or something. Run that by me again.
So the state is giving us this $8.9 million in 2 different distributions.
Yeah.
We just got half of it this morning.
Okay, so you got like 4
the rest of it we're supposed to get after we submit our spending plan and show that we have spent the first set of money by September 1st. So we get half of it now. We've already got it. We're ready to spend it. We can apply to receive the rest of it after September 1st.
How much time?
No, it's not.
How do you feel about it? You feel like you can get it all done?
I think it's going to be a real balancing act to be able to distribute all of this in not only an equitable manner, but in a manner that will provide the documentation we need to pass an audit. I'm concerned about that. We cannot release these funds without proper documentation and subgrants, and that's definitely going to take some time. There has been a lot of talk that Congress is likely to extend the time with which we could spend this money. but there's no guarantee of that. And they're kind of, you know, they said it had to be spent by the end of the year. Well, now they're saying it has to be spent or planned to be spent or encumbered. So it's a little unclear, but it's a big challenge to try to spend that much money and do it responsibly in such a short period of time.
If we know any small businesses that would be interested in this, who do we direct them to now?
Assuming this gets approved today, that will be rolled out with NACO here within a couple of weeks. And as soon as we have that information, we'll share it to the commissioners, and we'll put out press releases for the businesses.
Okay.
Patrick, shoot, I had a question now, I forgot. Can we, the county, if we went out and hired additional people to deal with this, would that be covered under our reimbursable expenses?
Yes, it could be. We did have some discussions about that early on, and that's what we're looking for this vendor that NACO is engaging with. We're looking for them to do that work, but we definitely have talked about bringing people on to help administer this, but we think the vendor can handle this piece.
Okay, anything we spend to the, any cost to the vendor will be covered under the CARES Act?
Yes.
Thank you.
So if there aren't any other questions, on the small business grant program, I'll keep going.
Please do.
Okay, so the next item we have in the budget is remarketing tourism. This is a joint proposal from the Lake Tahoe Visitors Authority and the Carson Valley Visitors Authority. It's worth noting that 501c6s, which the visitors authorities are, they're a special type of nonprofit, that they have not received any other support from the CARES Act related to impacts of COVID-19. And as we all know, travel and tourism is our hardest hit sector because of COVID-19. So the proposals that they have put together are for marketing campaigns to restore travel confidence and to provide information on destinations, what kind of offerings we have, how we're accommodating people in the age of COVID, and what activities they can do. They're really looking to target regional customers. Road trips are anticipated to be the first things that recover. They are prepared to give a full presentation. I would like to schedule that for an upcoming Board of County Commissioners meeting so you can hear what they're proposing in full before we make a commitment of those funds. They're looking for just under $500,000 for the proposal that they put together. My personal opinion is that I think this is a good idea. However, our rate of recovery going through the stages with the state seems to be stalling. So I'm a little uncertain of when it is the appropriate time to do this. Now, they need some lead time to put all of this together. But in my mind, this is maybe something we want to consider for the second round of funding from the state. But we will schedule them to come in and give the board a fuller presentation on what they're proposing.
Patrick, is there also money for the Chambers of Commerce?
I have a little bit for that. It's a little vague at this point. Let me step through this.
Okay, when you get to it, just highlight it.
Sure. So workforce development, that's the next line item. We're looking at employment and training programs for employees furloughed due to COVID-19 restrictions or lost their job. We would have to select a vendor to administer this program under federal procurement guidelines. No foregone conclusions about who that vendor would be, but it could be somebody like Join that we have a current relationship with for the school's internship program. So it would be similar to that. So there's, an entity that has the wherewithal to stand a program like that up to help people. Again, the challenge there, I think this is a good idea, but the challenge there is the limitation on the money and how long it's going to be available. And then nonprofits, we have a number in here it's kind of a plug number, $750,000. This is where we would pick up possible activity for the chambers. I know they're looking at different types of education and resourcing for businesses. I don't have a lot of details on that today, but we are looking at how we can help them out as well. I think the important thing to remember is that we can't use these funds to replace lost revenue, but if they are doing activities directly related to COVID-19, they are reimbursable.
Okay,
so we're still exploring that, not just with the chambers, but there's other nonprofits that we've been talking to. I think the challenge with some of them is that, the CARES Act was a massive piece of legislation with a lot of money. What was it, $2 trillion? And it's not just the counties that have money. The state has a lot of money as well, and they are trying to get it out the door as well. So if there's entities that are involved in COVID-19, there tends to be multiple sources of funding for them. So we're trying to zero in on how this could best be allocated, but we certainly recognize our nonprofit partners do have needs, and that does include the chambers. Other items in the spending plan, public health expenses. There's a small line item in here for $50,000. That's a result of conversations that the chairman and I had with Carson Valley Medical Center. They identified some COVID-19 testing equipment that they would be interested in. Subsequent to putting this budget together with the state, I've received from them a list of COVID-19 related things that they're interested in that total $500,000. So we're gonna have to revisit that and see what is eligible. Again, part of the challenge with the medical center is there are other sources of funding for COVID-19 for medical providers as well, and we got to make sure we're not double dipping. So we probably need to do some adjustments to the overall budget there, depending on how that shapes out with the medical center. Other county governments, East Fork Fire, Tahoe Douglas Fire, those two fire districts definitely have COVID-19 related expenses. I recently received a request from East Fork Fire for $544,000. That's for some expenditures they've already incurred, as well as some things they would like to do in the future. So we need to kind of parse through that a little bit as well. And mobile workforce, we preliminarily allocated $500,000 for the efforts that we have taken and that we plan to take to help facilitate the county's mobile workforce. We already have purchased some things like laptops and cameras and Zoom subscriptions, things like that. We are prepared to purchase more laptops and computers with cameras to help facilitate that. We only had a fairly small portion of our workforce had that kind of equipment when this happened, and we didn't budget because of the budget concerns for any replacement computer equipment. So it's an opportunity to procure some of that, which I think we can do quickly. That will help us adapt to living in the COVID-19 world. We're also looking at some of our applications and whether or not we could pursue some movement of them to the cloud, which would facilitate remote working. People don't have to come through our network firewalls and that sort of thing. We're still evaluating what's possible there. With the limited time frame, I'm not sure there's a whole lot that we'd be able to put forward in terms of moving applications to the cloud, but it's under review. So the path forward, where we go from here. We would like you to approve the recommended motion. Main thing I'm looking for is approval of the preliminary spending plan that we submitted to the state. Again, that's not locked in stone. I was unsure when we were going to receive this money. I was hoping we'd receive it in time to formally accept it at this meeting, but as I said, we just got it this morning and we weren't prepared to do that. So we're going to have to come back to the board at a later meeting to do a formal resolution to accept that money and put it in the right place and start spending it. I don't want to wait until the next regularly scheduled meeting, so we'll look at a special meeting that we can schedule as quickly as possible, since we did just receive that money this morning. I do think that it's important that as the board approves this, that they give broad authority to me to make adjustments to the spending plan and to authorize these expenditures to be able to spend this money as quickly as possible. I'm concerned if we have to bring pieces back to the board for individual approval, that the time it will take for those public meetings, we could run out of time and not put as much of this money to use as we might otherwise. So we'll also have a BOCC meeting to approve the spending plan for the second phase of the funding in September. So we'll be bringing that forward as well. And we will keep periodic reports on the Board of County Commissioners on the agenda, so you can get updates on how this money is being spent. That concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Commissioner Engel.
Patrick, have you reached, does this include the townships?
Have we included the townships? Yeah, we talked to the townships. They're, the towns are part of the county, so we consider them county departments. From what I understand, they have pretty minimal COVID-19 expenses compared to some of our other departments, but they're certainly eligible, and we're talking to them about it.
Okay.
Other questions? Commissioner Walsh.
You're muted again.
You're muted, Larry.
Sorry. Patrick, do you have since we just got this money today, do you have a wording for a recommended motion?
Yeah, I think what's in the packet should be sufficient. Let me get to that page. Yeah, I think the recommended motion that's in the agenda package is sufficient. Like I said, we're going to have to do a formal resolution, but I think this works for today.
Okay, well, I'll be ready to make a motion absent any further discussion.
Patrick, we don't want you showing up to work in a Lamborghini with all this distraction.
That is definitely not a COVID-19 eligible expense. And Terry Willoughby would never let me do that.
I think Council just has a new model called the COVID-19.
Yeah, don't get COVID mixed up with Corvette.
Oh, darn it.
All right. Any other questions for the county manager? All right. Well, then, Mr. Walsh, I think we're ready for a motion.
Yes, I move to accept the $8,931,061 Douglas County Coronavirus Relief Award from the state of Nevada. Approve the preliminary spending plan submitted to the state of Nevada. Authorize the county manager to sign any award documents, and direct the chief financial officer to make any necessary budget adjustments based on the discussion and the direction of the board.
Well, second.
So I think Wes got in just ahead of you, Dave. So we have a motion by Commissioner Walsh, a second by Commissioner Rice. Any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none. Call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any nays? No nays? And the motion passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Right. We'll go down here to item 10. No. BOCC reports. Any commissioners that have reports? Well, let me read it in the minutes first.
Nope.
For presentation only, reports, updates from county commission members concerning various boards and/or commissions that they may be a member of or a liaison to, or meetings, functions they have attended. Gentlemen, any?
None.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. Commissioner Rice.
On July the 23rd, we had a meeting of the, meeting of the Nevada TRPA. And the single item on the agenda was to approve the reopening of a casino here at the lake. As you know, we lost the lakeside. Unfortunately, they were not able to keep going due to the pandemic. However, years ago, for those of us that have been here for a while, they had a casino right where the, well, they used to call it the Burger King building, and that didn't fly too well. So now it's the Sushi Pier. And it's right across the parking lot from the sheriff's facility up here at the lake. And it was called John's Nugget or Ed's Nugget. And they are going to reopen a casino at that site, incorporating the existing businesses. And we approved it unanimously. And now all they have to do is get their approval from the Nevada Gaming Authority for a unrestricted license. And we will be able to reopen that as a casino and hopefully employ probably 50 people. So that's good news up here at the lake.
Yeah. Are you talking, is that the building that's across from Kale?
Yes.
All right. Okay.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. John, somebody used to own it. He ran for lieutenant governor. I forgot.
John Mason.
Yeah, right. All right. Any other comments or questions from commissioners? Hearing and seeing none. We'll open this for closing public comment. At this time, public comment will be taken on those items that are within the jurisdiction and control of the Board of Commissioners, or those agenda items where the public comment has not already been taken. Any public comment, Natalie?
Yes, Natalie Wood for the record. I have 3. I will start playing them.
Okay.
My name is Paul Leonard. I am your neighbor in Washoe County, north of you. I read with distress your sheriff's comment on not responding to calls from the public library because he disapproved of a position that they took. I mean, are law enforcement personnel now going to pick and choose when they enforce the law? I don't think that was what was meant when they gave their commitment to protect and serve the public. Thank you.
Okay, next.
My name is Terry White, TerryWhite, and I want to inform the commissioners of an inaccuracy of the staff report on the administrative agenda number 9, specifically on page 620 of the packet. What I want to call attention to is that staff's report makes comments to and references an email I sent on May 9th. That is not specific to the item. So I directed a letter to the county engineer dated July 23rd, which is also in your packet. And that is what specifically addresses the issue of the abandonment of the easement. And so I want to call to your attention, that you should reference my letter, not my email, and that I do oppose the abandonment of this because I don't see any reason why the county should or would want to abandon some right that it has on property that otherwise doesn't appear to be any reason to abandon. Thank you.
Okay, next.
Jim Slade. I'm disappointed with the board's votes on items number 5, 6, and 7. On 5 and 6 in Indian Hills, you ignored the part of required finding A, both you and staff, requires that there be a change in circumstances. There was no discussion of that. On required finding B about demonstrated need, you completely ignored the fact that 7,000 new dwelling units can already be built. And you can't just keep claiming that there's a demonstrated need without taking that into consideration, as you continue to do. And on required finding D about compatibility, it's not consistent with the actual and master plan use of the adjacent properties on 3 different sides, but you ignored that and looked to the north where, yes, you could find some consistency. And then, Chairman Pendle says, well, we're supporting the Planning Commission, which is an important aspect of listening to the public. Of course, then when we move on to number 7, he changes his mind completely. On item number 7, again, not consistent with the surrounding zoning. Nobody even brought up the applicant's reasoning for why he wanted this approved when he reminded you that his mother's 92 this year, and the sale of this property will provide her the money that she will be able to live 20 more years in independent senior living that she's in right now. So that is his reasoning for trying to get her the most money that she can have out of this property. That is a totally inappropriate reason, and you should not succumb to that sort of thought process. Mr. Rice, of course, says he's going to side with the Planning Commission again, that he believes that they got it right. And then when the vote comes along, he apparently feels pressure from his pro-development buddies, Centerville and Walsh, and changes his mind with no excuse whatsoever and just goes along, as he always seems to with Rice, with Walsh and Penzel, and finding some excuse to approve almost every development that comes before this board. No backbone, it's shameful.
Okay, next.
Ellie Waller, W-A-L-L-E-R. I want to comment about the Indian Hills area. Again, as always, I live in this area. This is a community plan update necessity. You keep changing the complexion of our community, and we have no recourse in our ability to say this is what we want now, not what the future will be based on what you're approving to date.
Okay, that was the last message received at 4:32 p.m.
Okay. We've been doing it for 3-4 minutes now. We'll go until 4:38 in case somebody else wants to call in. Give it another 5 minutes.
Further issues in regard to Saturday, because apparently from the county manager's email, we are not meeting down there at East Fork. That's my understanding.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
So,
Mr. Cates back on the line here.
Well, I can understand that.
I'm sorry.
And so we'll just maintain at our residences and see what happens.
Yeah, like I said in my email, I will send you guys updates throughout the day as I know what's going on, and try to keep you informed as best as we can.
Patrick, where are you going to be?
I'm going to go to the EOC so that
Okay.
I can convey information to all of you.
Okay. And there will be security for the government offices?
That is correct, yes.
Okay.
They have a detailed plan with multiple jurisdictions to protect property and people.
Well, I told you guys that my sergeant from LAPD was here for a visit, and he's aware of the situation. He's now with LAPD SWAT, and one of his latest text messages was, "Do not underestimate these people."
I think the sheriff's office taking lead, working with emergency management in the county and multiple other jurisdictions, are very well prepared for the worst.
Yeah, they seem to be, and from what I've been hearing and some of the, I mean, not the details, but some of the anticipated things that could happen, they're doing a stellar job.
Yeah.
Mr. Engels, I wonder if you would join me on this. Whereas you and I sometimes disagree on issues, the one issue that we consistently agree on is public safety and supporting it. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I would.
I don't want anybody to think they can divide us.
Never.
There you go. All right. Let's see. I've got 436. Have you received any more posts?
Nothing else has come through.
It's 4:37. We got a minute to go, gentlemen and ladies.
Are you going to do a countdown, sir?
Say again?
Are you going to do a countdown for us?
Yeah. Yeah. Launch. No, it's tedious to be counting down the minutes.
It's sort of like watching a pan waiting for the water to boil.
Yeah, right.
Or is that a bad analogy?
You know, anymore, they're tough. You have no idea. All right. I got 4:38. For the good of the order, we would call us adjourned, and gentlemen, be safe. And ladies, be safe.
Roger that.
Thank you, and hopefully we won't hear from each other Saturday.